So now we're going to get down to the side that's a little more fun. I'm going to touch base on something real quick, though, since you guys are so interested in convertible notes. So traditionally, convertible notes are based on a time scale. You'll hear them say it's an 18-month convertible note, 12-month convertible note, whatever. Something that I'm seeing that's kind of new, which actually to me makes more sense, is I'm seeing convertible notes now tied to a milestone. Because what happens at the end of that 12 months if you didn't quite get where you thought you were going to go? Now the 12 months is here, now your note's converting. What do you do?
So investing, you want to have a
Right. So I'm seeing more of them go to milestones where they're going to say, we're going to give you your go-to-market. And it's not necessarily based on 12 months or 16. It's meant in achieving all the bullets in your milestone. So that's the same thing. In R&D, you don't do fixed price contracts and research because you don't know what you don't know until you start researching. So it's always a cost plus. And we're seeing more of that I'm seeing that starting to happen now in convertible notes where they're based on achieving the milestone, not the time frame. Because things may slide in that time frame. Anyway, just a thought. That's happening now. Okay, so now we're going to get kind of into the fun part where it gets a little, there's a little more art involved in it. There's not quite so much science. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about their investor documents. So we're going to assume you now know what you're doing. You've done all your strategy planning. You've got your act together. And you're getting ready to go out and talk to investors. So now we're going to talk about your investor documents, how to build them, what does an investor care about, what's important to an investor, what's really not at all important to an investor, and what should you be focusing on. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to walk and talk like a CEO. And what I mean by that is that most young people, you don't wake up in the morning and be a qualified CEO. It generally takes a few years of practice. You start off, sweeping floors, then you become a supervisor, then a manager, then a director, then a VP, and eventually a CEO, and now you know how to talk like a CEO. And you learn that over time. As a young person waking up, you still sound like a young person. You still sound like an engineer, or you still sound like a coder or something like that. So we're going to talk a little bit how to work your way down there. When CEOs get together, they talk completely different. We'll talk about some little one-liners that I have that I like to do it. So one of the things we're going to talk about that's stuck in my mind when we talk about CEO, if you want $1, you talk details. If you want millions, you talk vision and strategy. Okay? So I can guarantee you that 9 out of 10 pitch decks I get have 9 pages of detail and possibly a half page of vision and strategy. There's something backwards there. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and how to do investor decks. Now, to do the disclaimer at the beginning of everything, we're going to talk in black and whites. Like I said earlier, everything's in gray. So I'm going to show you a format that will work with any investor, and we're going to tell you what parts of that is important. Now, like anything, every investor has their own specific ways of doing it. There's a variety of charts you can choose to communicate information. If you're in a large room of people, no matter what chart you pick, somebody in that room will hate that chart. I hate those type of charts. I don't know why you chose that one. Anyway, so you're going to find that there's a lot of variability. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about what I call a baseline pitch deck. Your baseline pitch deck is your pitch deck that you could just leave with somebody, and they could read it, understand what you're doing, and say, I get it. Okay? And then from that pitch deck, you're going to build all the other pitch decks. So we'll talk about the differences of where you're at and what you're doing, whether you're talking in a room full of people. Are you at a competition at F50 with a room of 400 people and 10 investors on a panel? Are you sitting down at lunch one-on-one with an angel investor? We'll talk about where all these things come into play. All right, so let's talk off with a little bit. So a gentleman I met about 7, 8 years ago who's got a really good video out on YouTube. His name is Simon Sinek. It's called How Great Leaders Inspire Action. If you haven't seen that video, I'd recommend it. It's probably about 4 or 5 years old, this video, but it's got probably 5 million downloads. And it's a really interesting way to understand it. His philosophy is people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And he incorporates this guy right here, which he calls the golden circle. And what he tries to communicate from here is most of us, 98% of us, talk like this arrow. We start from the what, talk about how, and go into the why. An example of that would be any commercial you see on TV. Hi, we're HP. We make the greatest printers and copiers and computers in the world because how do we do that? We use the finest products, good glass, yada, yada, yada. That's why you should buy us. That's a standard way to talk. That's how most of us people talk. When somebody comes up to you and meets you in a public environment or at one of Rob's great meetups, then somebody says, oh, what do you do? Oh, I sell bicycles. Okay? That's the what you do. And that's how 99% of us talk. The 2%, which he wants everybody to change their way to do it, to be a great leaders, the 2% start with the why and work their way out to the what. Now, the classic person that everybody in this room knows that was one of the 2%ers that did that was Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs never started by saying, I make computers. He starts by saying, I'm going to change the way you listen to music. You're going to da-da-da-da. He talks about his vision, his why he's doing it. This is why this is exciting. And we're going to do this, and at the end it says, oh, by the way, we make computers. Okay? So it's a different way to think. But watch this video. You'll see some really good examples. Why did the Wright brothers create flight? When less than 500 miles away were 1,500 of the brightest scientists and engineering minds the U.S. could put together. Yet, they didn't do it. So there's this. So it's an interesting video. So watch it a little bit. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because I've always felt that's logical. When you're looking for a team, to build your team, you can build a team faster with your why than you can your what. Why are you doing what you're doing? That's probably what brings the passion to you. And we're going to talk about how to define that a little bit as we go along. Okay, now we're back to the beginning, good old step one. So, you're getting ready to start writing your documents and create your stories. So the first thing you want to know is where do you belong? Let me ask you a question. How many people in here have a disruptive idea that they think is going to change everything? Okay, quite a few people. There's a few here. Most people believe that. However, most of you aren't disruptive. You're probably better, faster, cheaper. So let's talk about better, faster, cheaper. There's nothing wrong with being better, faster, cheaper. In fact, better, faster, cheaper is much lower risk. You're just building a better mousetrap. That is proven long. It's not difficult. To be game-changing is a lot of risk because you're shaking everything up. Most game changers will die on the vine because you're moving a big rock up a big steep hill. That's why you're game-changing. Now, it's higher risk. It's more complicated. The return, much greater. Bigger return. 9 out of 10 companies, though, are better, faster, cheaper. Now, the reason it's important to know that, because if you keep trying to convince everybody you're a game changer, you're disruptive, you're going to do all this, you're going to lose all your credibility eventually. And everybody's going to say, but you're not that. So, and your strategies are going to be different between better, faster, cheaper, and game changing. So they're different. So make sure you're not drinking your own Kool-Aid. And the way you go about marketing and selling yourself is different. So understand first, which one of these two blocks do you fit in? Second, back to that thing again as you're going out. Understand the intent of the model. What's the intent of the model? Who was awake this morning? The intent of the model is 10-time investor return, right? That's our new thought now. We're going to make sure we keep the investor happy. Because that means we're going to do everything right, okay? Explosive growth. We're all talking about explosive growth. It's not a leisurely walk down to $1 million sales. And back to that classic, have a plan. All right, so when you go in and talk to the investors, there's key walkaway points you want. And let's talk a little bit about the type of people you talk to. Investors and partners, strategic partners, they have the same interests. They want to hear the exact same story. And what that is I don't care what you do. How is working with you going to make me a lot of money? An investor doesn't really care what your product is. He doesn't care. But if teaming up with you can make him a lot of it, that's all they care. So they're in it for their own interests, and it's more about how to make money, not necessarily the details of what your product is and all these little aspects of that. So the key points you want to come across. One, there is an opportunity. You have a solution to a problem necessary to capture that opportunity. You notice I didn't say you have the problem, the solution to the problem. If you're solving a big problem that can be taken to a large $100 million or billion-dollar opportunity, then there's lots and lots of problems to solve, not just one. But you have a solution to a problem. And that's important because as you're developing your message to the investor, you get to choose the problem you're solving. And make sure you choose the problem that's easily directable to the opportunity and hopefully a problem that your solution solves. So it's important that you're solving a problem. So that's the key. There is a solution. You have an executable plan and you understand the cost. And that's a biggie. Find it interesting that all the companies I work with, and I work with lots and lots and lots of startups, that they all go and do their cost model from the bottom up, and they've got this detailed cost model. They all swear by it. Yet all of them want $500,000 for their seed funding. Amazing to me that 100 startups can do 100 cost models and all arrive at $500 for their seed funding. 500K. It's amazing. But anyway, you have a plan and you understand how it costs. The reality is most startups really don't know what it's going to cost them to run their business. Now, you have the right team to execute this great plan. You are defensible. And what's defensible mean? Everybody thinks defensible means you have IP. It might. You may have trade secrets. Coca-Cola doesn't have any IP. McDonald's doesn't, or I mean KFC doesn't have any IP. They have trade secrets. So maybe you have IP, maybe you have trade secrets. Maybe you're defensible by just being first to the market. And you're just going to keep running faster than everybody else. Not a problem. Those are all defensible. You're scalable. If I have to go and knock on 100,000 doors to get 100,000 sales, that's not scalable. So you have to have a scalable solution that can grow quickly. Understand the barriers to entry. There's two types of barriers to entry. When somebody normally asks you what are the barriers to entry, what they usually mean and what are the barriers for your competitors passing where you are today? What's their barrier to getting to where you are? And that's normally what they mean. But the flip side is understanding what your barriers to entry are. So there's two ways. What are your barriers to entry and what's the barriers for the competitors passing you up? Again, if you're first to market, then that barrier is simply speed. How do I get money and move fast? Okay, another key important thing. You have an investor exit plan. If you're talking to an investor, you need to convince them that you have an idea how they get out. You know, so have a plan. Now, it may not be detailed. You may be willing to negotiate the details of that plan, but you have a fundamental understand what an investor exit plan looks like. Okay, now let's talk about some general guidelines. Okay, first, this is a biggie. And oh yeah, go ahead.
Can you talk about that and how does the investor exit plan actually looks like or what it is supposed to say?
Okay, so generally what that means is you have a time frame. You have a fundamental window you're shooting for. We're looking for exit in, let's say, 24 months, 36 months. So you got a sort of a window there. You understand what has to happen prior to that to get there. And when your exit is going to be either an acquisition or an IPO. So there's some reason, you know what the plan is, you know what it is, you kind of know when it's going to be. Now all that's squishy. None of that may transpire at the end of 3 years. It can be completely different. But you understand what it is, you understand what the plan is, that you're going to give them X% of this or you're going to do that. So you kind of have a sense of where that plan is going to go. A lot of times they don't think about that. And I'm going to show you later on how to do a plan so the investor knows exactly where your exit plan is and what's going on. We'll talk about that. But it's a good question. Okay, general guidelines. 1. You sell your product to customers, you sell your business case to investors. We really don't even really care that much about your product. As long as we understand what it is and we think it's semi-novel or has a place, so yeah, I might be able to sell one of those. So the point is you sell your product to customers and your business case to investors. Now, we're going to focus on opportunity based. So let me ask a question out there. What do investors invest in? Okay.
Opportunity to make 10x.
Okay. It's a variety of things. So a lot of times people say, oh, investors invest in teams. Sure they do, investors. Investors invest in opportunities. That's what investors invest in. They're looking for opportunities. They're using the team, the product, and your plan, check, to see whether or not you have the chance of capturing that opportunity. So if they feel the opportunity is in Internet of Things or smart homes and they're looking for you to come in, they're going to do that. So investors invest in opportunities. So what's the most important for me to convince the investor? That I have a great product? That I have a great team? The most important thing to convince an investor is there's a great opportunity here for everybody to make lots of money. Okay, if you do that, he's going to want to listen to the rest. Okay, so we're going to go from an opportunity base. Most pitch decks I get are product based. They're really all about the product. The other is simplicity and clarity. I can't overstress this enough. And we're going to talk about how to describe your business. In the software world, I get a lot of, so tell me about your business. Oh, we're the LinkedIn of Uber. What does that mean? I don't know what that is. Love to say stuff that, we're the, it just kills me. They take these two companies together, that's what we're doing. What does that mean? Am I driving around getting a job? I don't know what that is. Anyway, so we don't do that. Be clear, concise. The other thing that happens is apparently people seem to think that if I can explain it in one sentence, it's not very compelling. So I need at least 4 or 5 paragraphs and go on and on. The more you entrepreneurs talk, the more confused we get. You think you're giving us more and more information and really clearing up the whole situation here. And in reality, you're burying us like no tomorrow. Now, I understood you in the first sentence. By the 5 minutes later, I now have no clue what you do. Okay, so we're going to talk all the way through here about simplicity and clarity and the fact that you can truly tell me what your problem is and your solution in one sentence. Go ahead. Where's the microphone? There he is, right behind you.
Does that mean you only invest in what they call in Hollywood high concept things?
High concept. You mean, is it far enough down the road to understand what it is, or?
No. High concept is you can say it in one sentence.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I would say that if you can't say it in one sentence, then you don't know your business well enough to do so.
But then, of course, you have, you know, in Hollywood, there's this idea of something that's a story.
We're going to talk about that. We're definitely going to talk about the story. So, but we're going to keep it clear and simple. Let me ask you this. So, simple case. I walk up to a guy and I see him sitting there working on a bicycle, and I go, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" "I make bikes." "Oh, well, I understand what he does. He makes bikes. You know, he's not the Uber of LinkedIn. You know, so keep it simple. Your job is really keeping it simple and so forth. And we'll talk a little bit about this. Now we're going to talk a little bit about knowing your audience and your listener. So there's a variety of places we go. So we talked about the baseline pitch deck, which we're going to talk today, which has bullets in it, a lot of words and a lot of things going on so that somebody could actually read it. Now, you've got a variety of environments, and you have to know where you're going into so you can, you know, you don't want to bring a gun to a knife, you know, a knife to a gunfight, so to speak. So are you going to be speaking in a formal environment where I'm going to go one-on-one with investors sitting around a table and so forth? If that's the case, I'm probably going to bring my benchmark pitch deck, because it's got the information that we can have some detailed discussions. If I'm going to go into a public forum and do a speaking over a group, then I probably can't ask for money anymore, because I can't do that in public anymore, as we just learned about that whole investor deal. And if I'm in a public or a group, let's say I'm at an F50 or at any of the incubators, I'm doing a big competition, 300 people out there, there's a panel of 10, I'm on a stage doing my talk. Well, if I'm doing that, I sure don't want to use my baseline pitch deck. I'm going to be using pitch decks with big pictures, the Guy Kawasaki, one word, you know, all this stuff flashing up here, because when I'm done, I'm not leaving that pitch deck behind, and I'm there to impress them with the story of what we're doing. Different environment. If I was to give that pitch deck with a one word and big graphics in a formal environment, then when I'm done, I leave that pitch deck behind. Now as an investor, I've got my 20 companies I'm going to look at Friday morning and decide which 3 I like, and I get to yours, and all I see is one big word, how, and a big picture. I don't even know what this pitch deck's about anymore, so I'm going to throw it away. So you got to have the right pitch deck and the right thing. The message that goes along with that never changes. Once you've got your message and your themes down, that never changes, but the deck itself does a little bit. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the story back there, so we're going to talk about that. Your pitch deck communicates the facts the way you want them to do it, in order that you want them, and in the way that you want them presented to the audience. Okay? That's all your pitch deck does, is it gives you the facts that goes along with it. The story is the piece of you standing up talking. So back when we got the $25 million on our first pitch, we could easily have stood up there and read the PowerPoint slides and talked to it, answered the questions, and probably still eventually could have gotten funded out of that or anything. Today, the bar has been raised, that you better not be reading your slide deck. In fact, now they want a little bit of theatrics to go along with your pitch. So the secret is have your pitch deck present the facts in the order you want them. And then you tell a story that all it does is mirror with the order of your pitch deck. In the perfect world, if you do it right, then the story that you're telling will never once use any of the words on your pitch deck, any of them. Because we can read your pitch deck. We know what your pitch deck says. So you need to be telling the compelling. So this is where you kind of, again, do your best, you know, Steve Jobs. You're going to tell us this story of how these things happen, and you're going to compel us with a story. Now, unfortunately, most people don't do that well. So it's sort of an unfair advantage or sort of an unfair demand of the market. Not everybody's a good storyteller. Most people don't do real well in a public in front of a bunch of people under the gun having this talk. Yet, again, the bar's been raised, and they expect to see a little bit more of that. So they want to see that confidence and that discussion and that compelling story. Is it right? Is it wrong? Does you being able to give a compelling story make you any more or less investable? Absolutely not. But unfortunately, it's kind of the nature of the beast. You know, people have gotten good at that. They expect to see that a little bit. Now, it's not black and white, but we're going to talk a little bit when we get to teams about about CEOs and how some of them seem to get funded no matter what they do. And others can pitch for years and never get a dime. Okay, we got the want dollars, we can talk details. So keep in mind when we go down this, there's two different pieces of this. There's the story, and then there's the presentation. Okay, let's look at an outline here. So this is the outline that I like to see and like to use for investor presentations. And it comes in a variety of manners. So obviously, since we're opportunity focused, we're going to start with the opportunity. This is the why are we all here? And the reason we're here is because you're going to tell me that this is this opportunity is so great that I'd be foolish to not jump on board, right? Okay? So now, if you've done a great job of telling me why that's a great opportunity, what's my next question? Well, if it's such a great opportunity, why isn't everybody doing it? Okay? That is the problem you need to be solving. Not that you're making profile entry easier, or that this thing is expensive, or that's complicated. You need to be solving the problem of how you're going to capture that opportunity. And so that's where a lot of the problems break down. People pick the wrong problem to be solving. Sure, their problem they fix that, but most of the time it's a tactical problem, not a strategic problem. Okay, now you're going to go in, you're going to tell me the problem, that problem to capture the opportunity. The next thing you want to do is tell me about your solution. Tell me specifically how your solution solves those problems you just explained to me that are problems. And then on top of that, I also want to know why you, not that you just solve the problem, but why are you neat? Are you neat because you got a great business model? Is your product neat because it incorporates some two things? So in this one thing about your solution, you say, I solve problems and it's a great idea and here's why. So you want to bring that together in one package. Then we want to get to your market. And when we get down to the market, when we talk about the market, we really want to know not so much more size anymore. Size is really what goes up on your opportunity. Your opportunity is where you define for me how big this giant multi-billion-dollar market is you're going into. What's really more important on the marketing slide is that we understand that you understand your market. Do you understand the dynamics? Are there any little important metrics in there that you understand? Where do you fit in here? Who all's playing in your sandbox with you? And what corner of the sandbox do you belong in, and why are they there, and why are they different? Then once we get through that, we're going to go down and here's that pesky plan again. We're going to do a one-page plan. It's based on milestones. It'll have your product development, business development, and it'll have on it what you've got for your, what it costs you to go through each one of these milestones. Okay, then we're going to come down and we're going to talk about the team, and then we're going to go and get into some the funding, which I consider this closing slide. So this is what I like. What I see most of the time is people jump right on in with the very first slide being, here's the problem I'm solving. But we haven't really laid out the groundwork. Why do I care what problem you're solving? And you haven't enticed me to care about your problem yet. That's why we started with the opportunity. Get me excited on why we're all here. So with that real quick, let's break things down in some real simple terms. So there's a variety of areas. Everybody heard about, how many people in here have done a 2-minute elevator pitch somewhere? Okay? That's a long elevator ride. You know, really what happens in your elevator is you have maybe one floor. So you got a 10-second elevator pitch. So anybody in here want to give me a real quick, who's got a good 10-second elevator pitch? Okay, go.
Mint on steroids.
What's that?
I'm mint on steroids.
Okay, okay. Not sure that gets me to follow you down the hallway. So usually what happens when I ask somebody what's your 10-second elevator pitch, it's amazing how many words I can jam in 10 seconds. Sort of like when I get some of my executive summaries. You know, when you send me an executive summary, I really don't want it in 3-point font with lines all over the entire page. It's amazing how people try to square everything, on one page. Here's a good 10-second elevator pitch. If I've only got 10 seconds to talk to an investor, I'm going to say one thing and one thing only. I've got a great company, and I can give you a 10 times return on investment in 24 months. Here's my card. I only have 10 seconds, so I don't have time to sell him on my product. And if I try to sell him on my product, it's not going to work. I'm not going to sell him on my product in 10 seconds. So I'm just going to convince him that I can give him 20% or 10% return on investment in 2 years. If that's of interest, call me. I'll show you how we can do that. That's your 10-second elevator pitch, okay? You don't have to talk like an auctioneer. All right, so let's talk about this. Let's get started on your pitch deck now. Let's see, okay. So we're not going to talk too much about the title page, but your title page, you're going to wow me with this great logo that you guys have spent all night working on. You're going to have a cool tagline up there that makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. But you're going to have all this stuff up here. So the first thing we're doing on this slide deck is you're going to have an opportunity. You're going to tell me, what is the opportunity? And then I want you to define that for me simple and clear. We are in the $42 billion social media market. We are in the one line of what your market you're in. And again, if you're making gear shift knobs, you're not in the $7 trillion automotive market. So make sure you pick the right market. What that one sentence does up there, one, it shows me that it's big. This number does not have to be your TAM. It doesn't have to do anything. This is a classic marketing number. So you want that number as big as possible. We're in the $240 billion social media market or something like that, okay? So that now establishes, now as an investor, I know exactly what sandbox you're in. Oh, you're in the social media space. You're in the enterprise space. You're in the smart home space. You're in the whatever. So by doing that, you've now bracketed everything for me. So now I'm going to start in my head, as the natural person does, start formulating the ideas on my perception that I think I know about that space. So now I know exactly where you're at. So now you've framed it. We can have a much more clear conversation. Rather than standing up and saying, the California road systems are broken. And I'm like, well, okay, well, that's a problem, sure. And now you're going to try to convince me how you're going to solve that problem. But I'm not even interested at this point yet, okay? So now, what I want you to do, once you go and break that down, now, why is this an opportunity? Why is this an opportunity? So what makes it an opportunity? It's an opportunity because, one, it's growing. So you want to show me some stats that say the market space you're in are growing. And I'm more important about what's happening between 2015 and 2020 than what happened between 2009 and 2012, which I see a lot of, oh, from 2009 to 2012 it grew 400%. Well, okay, but it might be done now. So what I really want to know is what's happening in the future. So show me that it's growing. Growing does not have to be dollars. It could just be users. More and more people are doing this. So an important number to have in your head right now are the 83 million millennials in the United States. Because they're the group that's coming up with the money. They're going to be buying, and I'm hoping the products that you guys are making are for the millennials. If you're making a product for the baby boomers, you better be a first to market because we're dying. So you better get us quick. Okay, so your focus needs to be things like millennials. So there's 83 million millennials in the United States. And so that's the kind of number you can say, wow, you know, of that, and they can't live without this, and our product fits them, so there you go. Okay, so why is the opportunity? It's growing. Somebody wants it. Why does somebody want it? So some statistics that can show me that it's in high demand, okay? And the other thing that you want to look at is some of the market dynamics that are going on, and the key one is why do they want it now? So, if you can't convince me it's growing and that people want it and they need it now. So a lot of times it can be things along the lines of just there may be regulations changed. So a great boon for a lot of companies were in the electronic medical records. There were companies that said, you know, this would be a great idea if medical records were electronics and so they started working on that, okay? Then all of a sudden, one day, the government decided, oh, the entire medical industry has to have electronic medical records. It's law. Well, if you're in that position as a company, life just got good. You know, now they've got to come your way, okay? So that's what you want to show in an opportunity is why it is. Why is it growing? Why now? And like I said, if you've done that, then we're going to want to talk about that. Now, I'm going to talk about this statement down here, your vision statement. All of you work in a space, and you've got your vertical market. I want you to think about this in context to what you're doing. The future of blank is blank. And this develops your mission statement. And here's where it's important. So I helped to launch a company last year that was a commercial scale hydroponics. So she was out trying to raise a team, talking to people about hydroponics. I got a greenhouse. I'm selling greenhouses and so forth. Everybody's like, okay, hasn't that been around for a while? Isn't that kind of that? And so she was having trouble, so I really don't want to work. So we started talking about it. We said, well, why are you doing this? Why did you get in the greenhouse business? Why do you think this is an opportunity now, and why is it exciting you? She says, well, I believe the future of agriculture is grow local, consume local. So rather than growing everything in Salinas and shipping it all around the world to ripen in a truck somewhere and eventually get to a store, that she believes the future is that it's going to grow right here in this neighborhood, and that neighborhood's going to fill the stores in this neighborhood, and everybody's going to have ripened produce in the store now. And she believes that's the future. Now you're seeing that movement with farmers markets on Saturday. You know, they all do those kind of things. So a lot of people believe in that vision. And if you're looking for a team and you come back up with, I believe the future of agriculture is grow local, consume local. So, well, I believe exactly the same thing. Well, now you have the potential. You guys all have a common thought. There may be a reason to become teammates, you know, work together, okay? So think about your why, your vision statement. The future of blank is blank. And here's how that happens in the big world. So you talked to Elon Musk years ago, and he would tell you that the future of automotive is electric cars. Now if you talk to Elon, he'd tell you the future of automotive is electric cars that are using his batteries. Minor twist on that, but still the same fundamental thing. So his thought was the future of automotive is electric cars. Toyota goes, oh, we absolutely agree. Let's partner up. You need to build a place to build a car? I got a little place here in Fremont. We can let you build your cars there. We'll take use of some of your batteries. We'll put them in our Priuses. Everything's really cool. Then about 18 months ago, Tesla and Toyota got divorced. They broke up, separated. Why? Their vision changed. Toyota no longer believes the future of cars is electric. Toyota's vision is the future of the automobile is hydrogen. So their first hydrogen car comes out this month in California. Runs on water. The exhaust is water. Nice deal. They're only sold in California because California's got 28 hydrogen gas stations. If you're in LA, you can actually get hydrogen gas pretty easily. Anyway, so their entire visions changed, and therefore they were no longer viable partners anymore. So your why is really critical. So keep them in that mind. The future of blank is blank. Think about that. That should be your vision system, and hopefully the future is what it is you're doing. Now, again, if you've done a great job convincing me that it's big, it's giant, it's growing, everybody wants it and they want it now, we're going to say, okay, great. So why isn't everybody doing that? Okay, here's the problem. Here's why they're not doing it. Maybe it's a technology problem. Maybe it's something different. A lot of times, maybe it's just a business model. So for example, let's go back and use Uber. Uber did not invent the car. They have they did not invent taxis. They did not invent public transportation. They simply came to the table with a different business model. No IP, no technology, none of that stuff. Just build me a little website, and a little web, a little app, and we're going to change the business model, okay? So the problem that you need to be solving is a problem, single line problem, that I can easily read that problem and say, wow, if you solve that, we can definitely take a bite out of that opportunity, okay? Not a tactical problem, which is normally what I see. The tactical problems belong down here. So normally I see things like, oh, well, so-and-so is expensive. That's the problem. Well, okay, so how are you going to fix that? We're going to make it cheaper. Well, okay. But that's not really the driving problem. It may be that underneath here there's some examples that says cost, complexity, fragmented market. There's a variety of little things underneath it that can validate and simple tactical problems that easily understand that says, oh, absolutely, that's why that one problem up there is important. Normally what I see are these tacticals. So a lot of times I look at a problem statement and I see a person that says, oh, we're solving these 7 problems. It is very difficult to solve a billion-dollar problem, period, let alone several of them. And the reality is, if you're solving too many, then it looks like you're everything for everybody and you don't have a focus and so forth. So this is really a critical point to ensure that you identify exactly the problem you're solving. And there's a little bit of an art to it. Like I said, you've got an entire white, clean canvas to choose from. Most people force themselves down a specific given problem. So select the right problem that you can use to leverage the opportunity. Now we come to your solution. So let's say for on the other problem, so obviously you said on the other problem that it's broke, something's broke, it's not working. So now obviously on this, you're just going to tell me that you fixed that, right? In simple terms, real simple terms. Understand that how you do that. Normally you'll start that with your name. Company XYZ, we deliver a socially rich platform that allows yada, yada, yada. Okay? And then it says, oh, okay, that solves that problem. Okay? Now, if you have a tactical problem in your problem page and you have a cost, fragmentation, and complexity, then when I get over here to the problem, the solution, I want to see cost, fragmentation, and complexity. Exact same order. So I don't want to have to think as an investor. We confuse easily. So if you had these 3 problems you fixed, there were problems, then I want to see distinctly that you fix those 3 problems in that same order. Don't move the P around on me and change everything around, so I got to figure out, are you solving the problems we talked about on the previous slide? It's obvious, it's clear, I understand it. And then over on this side, we talked about the why you. It's not just about solving problems. Why are you unique? Are you Uber? We're just bringing a novel business model to the table. Your product description. When it comes to product description, separate what it does from how it works. Don't really care how it works, but I do want to know what it does. And so try to keep that different. We need to know what it does is important for us to see it so we can understand it completely. But I don't need to know how it works. I'll get that later. Okay. Stay away from features. Go more towards benefits. and how you benefit the people that are going to use it, or the customers, or whatever the case may be. The whole point here is to spin up why you're different. This is a great place to bring up the fact that you've got IP. Maybe you have some patents. Maybe your patents have already been awarded. You know, that's even better. You know, other important info, and not inf. Anyway, so this is on the solution. This is what we want to do on here. And here's the thing that comes along from a philosophical. I like to set up these pages so that each one of these pages stands alone. I could easily do 3 or 4 pages on the solution. You know, maybe you have a really complex solution and you want to do 3 or 4 pages, and you can do some really nice graphics and some art. So here's what happens to a degree. If I give you one chart and one page and we hit everything right there, hey, it's simple, it's this, bang, bang, bang. That can have a really strong effect. I can see it, it's clear, it hits me alongside the head, it's like, wow, that's good. If we spend 5 or 6 charts talking about it, it now becomes a discussion. And so those 3 important features that you could have got to me on one chart and they could have been a home run statement kind of get lost a little bit in a discussion and a talk, and they lose their impact. Does that make sense? So that's why I like to keep things on one page, you know, just to hit them with the high points of it, and not talk about over several pages, because then it whittles down on the impact that the listener has from it. Now we're going to get to the plan, and we're going to talk about that. So the plan, now that you've done with your salute, hold on here, that plan shouldn't be there. Oh man, it's out of order. Oh, I missed market. I'm missing a chart. Okay, I owe you a chart. So let's talk about market before we get in there. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just a quick question, since, yeah, back to the solution. So in this pitch, in this deck, do you completely want to stay away from features? When does the potential investor essentially get, you know, well educated about what they're investing in?
Okay, that's a good question. So the purpose of this pitch right now, all you're trying to do is convince me that you have a business case, right? Okay, so here is an opportunity. So here's what happens normally. Everybody comes in, has their idea, they have their solution, their product, and that's their baby. And every parent is proud of their baby. Every parent wants to talk about their baby, okay? Which is why when I get a pitch deck of 10 slides, 9 of them are talking about the baby and none of them are talking about the business, okay? So here's what happens in a pitch. Somebody comes up and says, wow, it's kind of an interesting idea. Could you give me a little more detail on the technology features of how you work? Well, now I'm a parent saying, oh, pull out the pictures of the baby? Absolutely. So now you're going to probably derail the entire pitch now, because you're going to go down a rabbit hole talking about the details of your technical product. And they're going to go at the end of 10 minutes go, oh, I'm sorry, your time's done. But you only got to your 3rd slide. You just missed your opportunity to finish it up. So here, again, the best way to stay, you want to get engaged with investors and stay engaged. So if an investor comes up and says, well, that's interesting. I'd love to, can you tell me more about then your choice? Great idea, great question. How about if me and my CTO come back? We're available tomorrow at 1. We'll come back and sit down with you. We'll go through that in as much detail as you want. We'll answer all your questions. So you're trying to give them a reason to come back and visit them again, okay? And you can easily say, you know, I'd love to do that, but I know you have me on a limited slot time. I want to make sure I get through everything, you know, before we get booted out of the room, because I know you're going to boot me out. I can see the guy with the hook. You know, I got minutes left, okay? So that's a great way to say perfect question. That's also going to come up when they ask you things like your valuation. What's your valuation? Oh, that's a great question. Or they come up and start asking you about your finances and say, wow, how exactly did you arrive at your cost of, you know, your customer acquisition cost? That's a great question. I'd love to bring my CFO. Let's sit down tomorrow afternoon and talk about that, okay? So the purpose of this pitch is not to answer all their questions. So there's a guy that does the sales, that runs around, named Zig Ziglar. He's been doing sales training forever. He's got one of his little words of wisdom is, don't spill all your jelly beans in the lobby. Salespeople are terrible for that. I used to run a sales team, and you watch a young guy in there, and he's got his headset phone on. You can see the hands moving. He's talking to somebody on the phone, and he's doing his thing, and we gets done. And so I can see he's been on the phone for about a half hour. So finally he hangs up, and I walk in and say, hey, so I saw you were on the phone. How'd that go? Oh, great call. I said, great. When's your meeting? Well, we haven't scheduled that yet. Well, then it wasn't a great call. The whole purpose of being on the phone call was to set a meeting, right? But he didn't set the meeting. So now what he did, he spent a half an hour spilling all of his jelly beans in the lobby. Then he goes, so how about we set a meeting? Well, I think I know everything. You pretty much told me everything I need. I'll call you back when I'm ready. So the purpose of the investor meeting isn't to answer all their questions. It's to get invited back for the second meeting. So always use the opportunity. That's a great question. I'd love to come back and talk to you that with my team. How about we come back tomorrow? So that gives you an opportunity to do that and come back around. You're not there to answer all the questions. You want to keep them a little bit in, you want to keep them asking you back. Now, if they force you on and pressure you on a certain question and they want the answer, then give them the answer. You don't want to be coy about it and sneak around about it and sort of be sly. But if they ask you what's legitimately a complex question, like tell me how your product works, oh, well, man, I can't do that in my 10 minutes. How about we come back and talk? So try to use it there. But don't try to use it to skirt a logical question. Does that make sense? OK, so now we've got the solution. So now, and how come I don't have a... Oh. OK, where we at here? Oh, don't see it. OK, well, I'm going to back up here. OK, somehow I missed it. So we'll use some things. So the market slide, there's really one thing I want to talk about in general on that. So in the marketing slide, we already did the opportunity slide where you've told me how great it is and how big it is, and you give me a bunch of marketing numbers that tells me why this is an important place to be, right? So that's the opportunity. Well, there's other marketing aspects of that you can show me that you have insight to the market that doesn't talk about how big it is or anything like that, but there's knowledgeable things that are important that may be of value to know. So that's what we look for on this, is a couple nice little bullets where you can give me some little insight nuggets that are not, that it's an opportunity, but simply about the product, that there's some inner workings of that. Oh, by the way, did you know this? That would show me you understand that. But what I want to talk about in general, in big terms, is doing the competitive analysis. So most of the time when I see competitive analysis, it's product to product, features to features, these kind of things. What I want you to do is think a little bit bigger picture on this, and I want you to think about this more from your business and so forth. So one of the popular things that I like to use are the classic quad charts. All right, can everybody kind of see that over there? The classic quad chart. Have you guys seen these kind of charts before? So in the perfect world, we want you to end up here. Anybody want to know why we always like you to end up there? It's simply psychological. The reason we like you to end up there is because traditionally we're taught that everything down here is bad. Up to the right is good, down and bottom is left. It doesn't have any bearing. But if you can do a quad chart like this, it can really break up your fundamentals of how you differentiate yourself. What we're looking for here is not necessarily why is your product different, but why are you as a company different. So the important part is to define these axes correctly. And this is a little bit of art to that to help understand. Normally what you're going to do is you're going to start with what are the two things that you believe really differentiate you from everybody else in the market. Take those two things. Can you put them logically out here onto these, onto here? Like maybe this is low cost and this is expensive or whatever the case may be. So think of the two things that define why you're different. So let's say, for example, if I'm Uber and I was going to do this, I don't own any cars. Uber is one of the largest logistics companies. They have no cars. They have no warehouses. They have nothing. So now I'd want to understand how I'm different up here. So let's say this is me, Uber. I'm different because I'm privately owned, is one of the things that makes me different. And if I take a look at this, for example, let's say I want to compare myself with taxis. Well, taxis tend to not be privately owned, so that means they're corporate owned. And there may be something here where the company owns the cars, and here my people own my cars and the company. So taxis would be down here. So do we compete with taxis? Sure we do, but we're competing with them with different models. So when I'm done looking at this now, I can see differences in your company, and it becomes a little more obvious on how you as an organization. It also allows you to add a third level of depth on that by adding colors to your circles. So like maybe you can add different colors that differentiate whether or not these people are in certain aspects of what it is. So it allows you to have some depth to what you're talking about. This works a lot better than we talked about earlier, the charts with the X's and the Y's that say, yes, you have all the features, and no, your competitors don't. It doesn't tell me anything about you as a company. It might just help me determine whether I want to buy your product or not your product, but it doesn't help if I'm going to invest in you. So this is an area that I highly recommend animation. Because if you go up here, and the competitive space is a really, really tricky one, and it derails most discussions. Because if you're in a software space, the classic one, it says, well, isn't Google already doing this? And odds are Google probably is already doing it somewhere in some form, in some back room somewhere. but who knows? It may never come out. But you always get these big kind of things. So the guys that I worked with doing the kits on to make trucks into hybrid trucks, the question they always got, well, if this is such a great idea, why isn't Ford and Chevy doing it? I mean, if it was a good idea, Ford and Chevy would be doing this, wouldn't they? You know, it makes sense. And the idea is, well, they're going to, but it takes a lot of money for them to do it. And Ford does plan to come out with a hybrid truck in 2021. Well, that's a long time from now. Okay, so as you go through here, you want to walk people through the competitive landscape so that they arrive at it in the right way and arrive at it in seeing it the correct way. Or if not, it doesn't matter. If they don't think you're in the right place, you're not going to get invested. So there's three types of competitors always in your space. One is the incumbent. The incumbent is the company that's been doing it forever. The GEs of the world, you know. These companies have been around for 30 years, 40 years, they do this. Odds are nobody in this room is providing something that isn't available today. It may be available in more of an analog mode, or it may be available differently, or it may be harder to do, but it's probably there. Very rarely does somebody come up with something so radically new that it's never been done before in any form. So you've got the incumbents that do it, and they do all the time. Then you got the next level of people, which might be the new wave of people that have been out there maybe 5 or 6 years. They're kind of the hot companies, the Googles, you know, the Foursquares, these kind of companies, the Etsy's of the world that are taking kind of the new wave of things, and they're a little bit newer now, and they're doing things. And then you got the third competitor, which is the one just like you, which is sitting in a room just like this, thinking of their idea that they're going to launch in just a little while. The reality is they're more of your competitor than the other people are. Because you're now all probably employing similar business models, similar new waves of thinking. You're the next generation of stuff coming out. The first two are usually easy to find. It's hard to find that competitor that's sitting in the room with you at the same time looking at something. That becomes more difficult. So with those three in mind, we want to walk them through this chart, and we want to use animation to do that. So when I come up initially, I'm going to pop up to this chart, and I've got my quad chart on here, and I'm going to go click, and then my labels come out to the on the edge of those axes, and we say, okay, we believe this is what drives the differentiators in this market space here, is these terms on my chart here. Then you're going to go click, and now it's going to get populated with the branding of the big incumbents. Okay, everybody knows General Electric, everybody knows Xerox, and yada 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 yada. And there are these people. Yeah, they're in this space, but you can see they kind of fall over here and do this. And then you walk them through to say, then the next generation of folks that came out in this space were these kind of companies. Most of these, or many of these, you may also recognize, and they're kind of here, and they fall out like this, and this is what they brought to the table. Now the next generation of people, click, you pop it, now you pop up. And you go, and here's we are up here in this space here, and so this is how we differentiate from these. And it may be business models, it may be groups that they're going after, it may be market segments that they're going after, and all these things all feed into differentiation. Now when it's all done, it's like, oh, I get it. Boy, when we first started talking, I thought you and General Electric were competing against each other, and I say, how are you going to beat General Electric? Or how are you going to beat Google? But now when I've done this, I can see that you and Google are actually in slightly different spaces, slightly different angles, and yeah, you're in the same sandbox, but you're not really running into each other. Make sense? Okay? Then the last thing you can do on this, 9 out of 10 times, if you're an acquisition strategy or not, 9 out of 10 times, the people that are likely to buy you are also the people that are in your sandbox with you. That would be the Googles, the General Electric. So normally the incumbents and the bigger companies in your space, if they know that that's the direction the market's going, they're either going to do it in-house or they're going to buy somebody like you and get that capability, right? So the last chart, after you show me how you're uniquely different, you've walked through there, you say, oh, and by the way, click. Now some circles can pop up around. These are the likely candidates that would probably be candidates for acquiring us. So now that becomes a very powerful chart for you to really explain your market, to let me understand that you know your market, you understand your market, and now I can truly see differentiation. It's not just feature sets against feature sets. Make sense? A little bit of art to getting that done, but when done correctly, that's a very powerful chart right there. Yes? Microphone.
Who is the question?
Hi. So I have been told a lot that you never, when you do the competitive analysis, you never say that you compete on price or you compete on cost. So in the example above, you kind of like have, like the vertical axis is like low price to like very expensive. what is your thoughts on like, like presenting on like you are like a low cost provider?
Sure. So let's look at it in simple world. In a complex world, you're right. If you're discussing cost, then you're probably a commodity, and nobody wants to invest in a commodity, and nobody wants to be held hostage to having to be, investing in the low cost leader. Because that generally means your margins are low. That's how you're a low cost leader, or your quality is low, or a variety of the above in theory. However, I would say that's not always the case. In some cases, you are in that. So I worked with a company that makes headphones and Bluetooth speakers. Okay? That's all about cost and performance. There is no quad chart. There's how much are they and how much do they perform. So in their case, it's very simple. They're in a commodity market. They're in a consumer market where it's all about cost per performance. I can go out and spend $600 for a high-end set of Bose headsets. Sure, I could. And they sound amazing. But I don't have $600 for a set of headsets. I've got $150 for a headset. So now I'm going to find the best sounding headsets for $150, right? So in some cases it is cost. But you're right, in many cases you don't want to compare your product on a cost for cost because it's not about a cost race. That's probably not an investable model. Yeah. Way in the back.
What, I'm sure somebody can hear me on the tape. What are the axes of your quad chart?
It's dependent. Yes, it does. It's dependent on you and what it is. So it's critical to understand what the real strength of your company is, and then we will handpick those so that it becomes clear, and then we'll develop the story around it.
So it's not a Gartner report.
No, absolutely not. It's personal to you. Yeah. Yep, but we want them to be real good differentiators, and so and so there's a little bit of work to getting that chart done right. Every once in a while, the light just comes on and you go, oh my gosh, this is amazing, click, 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 wow, that was easy. And other times, we struggle with it. I mean, it's really a fight. Yeah?
So, in the quad chart, you're trying to show your best differentiators, which
Correct.
positions your company well.
Correct.
But if you're doing that and you're aware that there's a question that constantly comes up, which has a good answer, which you have a good answer for, but doesn't fit your quad chart, should you invest in another chart just to address that up front?
Maybe, but the quad chart is mainly to do your competitive analysis. You should be able to do the competitive piece in here. Is it a competitive question you got or a different? Yeah. Do you have an example of what you're talking about? Nothing particular. You should be able to do it in this chart. You've got 3D directions of which you can spin that story, so you should be able to capture it in there.
Like a business model.
Yeah, kind of like that a little bit, So normally if you're doing just the charts, you have 2D. You're either up, down, left, right? But if you add color to it, then you can really differentiate it in a color and actually add a third level to it, which can be very powerful. Because sometimes people will be similar. So I've worked in some spaces where some people are in a social environment, but they're very strictly focused on a certain type of a social thing. And therefore, they got a certain color. Because it appeared they're over here competing. They ended up in my quadrant over here. But really, when you put a color coding, you realize that we're going after completely different people. We're flying on different levels. Kind of like what bats do. Don't ask where that came from, but. Okay, so now we're done with the marketing piece, which is missing for whatever reason, and now we're going to go into the plan. So let's talk about plan a little bit. When we talk about plan, usually what I see in an investor deck when it talks about plans, what I see is a product plan. I see that you're going to roll out a product here, you're going to be in alpha testing here, you're going to test it, it's going to go MVP, you're going to launch it, you're going to do some stuff. I rarely see a business plan or anything about operations. All I get is, here's my product's going to roll out. Okay, well that's nice, and that's important. That's important. But we want to know what your business is doing. How does your business roll out, not how does your product roll out? So we want to know it by milestone. We want to understand your funding strategy. So I've had some discussions today with some folks that ask, well, what if I'm more ready for that and I want to skip the angel funding and just go to VC? Then the answer is great. If you can do that, if you're in a position to do so, does it make sense? So we want to talk about a funding strategy, which most people don't have. It's always, they just say, oh, I need some angel funding. How much? I don't know, $500,000. And then you want to have a schedule. What's the window to that? So I'm going to show you a format here after this that I came up with about a year ago that I use quite a bit, and it adds a lot. Normally when I see a schedule, I get something that looks kind of like a Microsoft project chart with lines going out to the right. Or software people like to do them as stairs going up. I did this, then I became an alpha, then I became a beta, then I became an MVP, and all this stuff happens and this, that. So we're going to completely take all that fancy stuff out. We're going to do a very simple yet detailed chart. And if you do this chart correctly, it'll tell them everything they want to know. It'll give you a ton of credibility because it'll be obvious you have a plan and you know what you're doing. So one of the questions you get from investors frequently like to ask, what are you going to do with my money? Right? If I give it to you, what are you going to do with my money? Okay? So we're going to answer that in spades. Okay? So we're going to put together a plan that looks like this. This plan has, like we talked earlier, you've got the 3 milestones: product development, go-to-market, growth. I have a finish line in this case. And that finish line, guess whose finish line that is? That's my finish line as an investor. That's your exit. Or that is where a potential exit will happen, whether that's an acquisition or IPO. It's going to happen somewhere at this window. Okay? So, now, we talked about earlier how the bar has been raised and everybody expects you to show up with an MVP, right? So let's go back to milestone number 1 here. Milestone number 1, product development. Only in this case, you're going to tell me that this one is completed. This is all the things you've done, which was one of those was to show up with an MVP. You cannot come out of this milestone without an MVP. You have to have an MVP to leave this milestone. Now, as we do this, there's actually a lot of business stuff that happened up on here. In most cases in this milestone, this is where all the work is, and there might be a couple bullets here, because it's all about building your product. But you're going to do some things. You're probably going to do a website, get some early website presence. Who isn't the one asking me how early is it to start marketing? You know, you might be doing some marketing, putting some stuff out there, writing a blog or something. But mainly, you're building your product. Out of this milestone in operations, you may have your executive team identified, or some of it. And if you may have a platform or your server up on Amazon, AWS, or Rackspace, or some other place, or whatever the case may be. So this is you getting it done, and this is what you're probably going to end up bootstrapping. Now, it doesn't mean you can't find somebody to fund this stage, but in today's modern times, this is a little more difficult. So now what happens is in the process of doing this, you've done a variety of things. 1, you've spent money. 2, you've probably done a whole lot of work without getting any money. You may have people on your team who have done things. You may have family and friends who may have given you $30K that feel that you have a really good idea and they give you a little money here to help you down the road. So you take all those things and you do your magic math and you come up with how much skin you got in the game. You ever hear that? People invest, how much skin you got in the game, you know? How much have you invested in it? So if you're coming to me and asking for $1 million and I can see that you've got $1 of skin in the game, probably not going to go very far. There's no commitment on your side. For $1, you could walk away tomorrow and you wouldn't lose anything. You don't care. You're done. So that's why we want to see how much skin. It's important how much investment you have in there. So in this case, these guys believe they have $550,000 of skin in the game. In this particular case, you want to tell the investor exactly how that breaks down so you don't act like you're pulling the wool. So we have $550,000 skin in the game, of which $300,000 of that is from private investment from friends and family or one angel founder, and $250,000 what we estimate for sweat equity, so that they understand which of that is cash. Now for a lot of folks coming out of bootstrapping, it's the other way around. Well, I bought a laptop, I've spent money, so it ends up being, well, we've got about $30,000 in cash spend, and I've got about $200,000 of sweat equity, because I've been doing this for 15 years. And I think it's worth about $200,000, okay? So anyway, so that's kind of how that arises. It's a squishy number, and nobody really pushes too hard on it, but make sure they understand how much of it's sweat equity and how much it was actually cash involved, okay? So now I understand how much you have in the game. Now you're going to come over here to my investor, and so in this case, my funding strategy, which I've developed, says that I need $550K to accomplish these things and to get my product validated and where I really need it to go, so it's going to be truly what a customer wants to buy. Okay? Right now, it's what I think a customer wants to buy. So we're going to put it out here. We're going to put it in some manageable amount of users. We're not going out looking to get 1 million people in the platform right now, because that would probably crash everything. So we want to find a reasonable amount of people. We're going to start really firing up the marketing a little bit. We're going to do a Kickstarter campaign. We're going to go out and get some folks and do things and yada, yada, yada. In product development, I have an MVP, so here I'm going to add some contests. I'm going to add a few little specifics to my design that we're going to do in this phase. We're going to acquire an automated system servers office team. We're going to scale, and we're going to get an office, yada, yada. It takes $500K, okay? So in my strategy here, I could easily go to a VC and try to do this, but he's probably not going to give me $500K. So it's probably going to be an angel play. But I know I need this, and I know I need $5 million in order to take it to $60 million in revenue, $5.5 million It's going to take here 2 years to do this, 1 year to do that. So on this chart now, I've laid everything out as a business. So there's a couple things that we want to do here that's important. One, use numbers. Don't come up to me and saying, oh, we're going to have some affiliates. What does that mean? You have 1 affiliate? You have 1,000 affiliates? This is a plan. We expect to have 50 affiliates. So put numbers in there. Make them real. Quantify them. If you're going to have 5, you're going to have 5. If, you know, but it's important to have numbers there because that's part of a plan. We plan to have 5. Why 5? Is 5 enough? Should it be 10? As an investor, we can talk about that. We're going to go, well, do you really need 50 of those? Would 25 be? Well, 25 could, but we want to get 50 for these reasons. Oh, okay, good enough. Maybe if I only need 25, I may only need 500K in funding if I don't go out and try to chase those extra 25 affiliates or whatever the case may be. Use numbers as much as possible. Normally I see things that are just normally like, oh, we're going to have partners. How many partners, you know? So this is all part of a plan. Make it credible, make it real, and make it aggressive. Investors don't invest in wimps. We don't want people to say, oh, well, conservatively I might do that. Okay, next. I want Elon Musk. I'm not conservative. I want to know who's going to go out there and eat this market alive and make us a ton of money. That's what we want to do. So be aggressive. Don't be worried about being it, but have plans. So here's another form of a model, similar kind of a thing, still the same thing. We talk about it here. It's important to get, if you know, the key things you want on these things are the things that are important. Did I get some patents implied? So you want to look at each one of these individually, understand what it takes to get in and out of them. I've got to have an MVP. Perfectly, I'd have an MVP with some patents and some things. So understand what you need to get there, what it takes to get your product validated, and that's your product validated and your business model validated. And then how big are you going to go and what does it look like? Now, in some of these models, it has nothing to do with revenue. It's simply getting people in a website. Sometimes in some social environments, they don't focus on getting the revenue. It's about getting 100 million, 10 million, 50 million people on it. Because once you get enough people captured in an environment, we can figure out how, if you got 50 million people hostage on your website, we can probably figure out how to make money out of 50 million people. Okay? So there's varying models and things to get cost in here and wrapped up on. Okay, now, go ahead. Also, good, yep.
So in the plan, you were showing the milestones, but there's like large leaps. If you see, I'm going from 12K users to 1.5 million users, and
sure.
Nowhere do I explain how I plan to go from point A to point B. Is that something you should be talking about in the 10-minute pitch, or?
My business development director and I would love to stop by tomorrow at 1 o'clock and tell you in detail how we're going to go through this. It's another opportunity. You've got a limited amount of time. So again, your job here isn't to answer all their questions. It's to get them to ask questions, go, wow, that's a great question. You know, we can spend a lot of time on that. You know, I don't want to derail the meeting. Let's do this. But you're right. There's a big gap. Oh, there's a big gap from 16 here of 12,000 to 5.5 million in 2 years after that. So a lot of things that can come from that, we can take a look at that. But we're going to show you something here in a second that will help that a little bit as well. So any more? Okay. Boom. Okay, now before we get down to that, so let's talk about the team. The team is critical. We talked about getting your team, trying to sell, you know, get people on your team by using the why. What's important on your team is 2 things. One, it's about skills and accomplishments. So it's not about where you work. So it's not a resume like you would for a job. It's strictly about performance. Do the people on your team, are they qualified to do what their title says they do? Why are they the CEO? Why are they the CFO? Why are they the CTO? Okay? Now, we want to talk in this, you want to talk about successes. So let's say you're a technical person. As a technical person, you've probably never brought a product to market. You may have wrote a lot of coding for products that eventually went to market, but you weren't necessarily part of that bringing it to market, because in a big company, that's what the business people do. That's not what the programmers do. Okay? So we want to talk about skills. I have successfully developed this, successfully developed. Use the word successfully a lot. Don't just say I worked here, worked here, worked here. And I see a lot of that. Or I've got 15 years experience building enterprise systems. Instead of doing that, say successfully develop multiple enterprise systems. That sounds better, because what they're looking for is success. If you've successfully done something once, you can probably successfully do it again. So if I see that your team has successfully done a lot of stuff, I'm inherently going to say, well, they can probably do that again, which is better. If your team's got 15 years of experience, it may have got 15 years of experience being successful at nothing. So that there's no correlation there. So just use the word successful a lot. And I'll give you a classic example. I worked with a company a few years ago, and one of the women that was doing marketing, they were a enterprise, not really an enterprise, but they were a business thing, and they were definitely a high-tech, in the high-tech space for high-tech companies. And she was in charge of sales. So when I initially saw their pitch deck, it comes up and she'd worked at Apple, she'd worked at Xerox, she'd worked at Cisco, she'd worked at Facebook, she'd worked at Microsoft. You know, it's like, man, these are all potential customers. She's the sales rep. She's been in all the right places. She's got all the right contacts. She's got a lot of experience, you know. And so then I asked her, I said, so what did you do at these companies? I was the receptionist. Okay, well, they were still impressive companies. Great companies, all the right companies, but she really didn't have the background skill set. She didn't really, to do the sales like she was slotted to, but it looked like she did. Anyway, so that's just an example, kind of an extreme. Now the reality is if a good CEO, she probably knew as the receptionist, she probably knew everybody in those buildings, so she probably could get in. But she really wasn't a salesperson. So anyway, so talk about your successes and spin those to what you've successfully done that are in correlation to what you're doing. Let's see. Okay, the second thing that's important is what don't you have on your team, which is in some cases almost as important as what you do have on your team. So here's a couple things that happen. So I see a team, you got this person, that person, you got 25 developers in India writing your programs for you, and all these things are happening. So I'm looking at it and going, wow, I don't see a business person. But you're not telling me you're looking for one, but you're telling me you have a great team. So my assumption is that you think you have a good team, and I can see that you have holes and you don't. So now you got a little credibility problem, okay? So now if you come up and tell me, says, oh, I've got this, this, and this. Oh, but by the way, we're looking for a chief marketing officer. Here's what we're looking for. We're looking for somebody specifically with these skill sets and these verticals with knowledge of these kind of companies. So try to be fairly detailed and specific on what you're looking for. That now shows me what you're having. Guess what now? That now gives you another opportunity to talk to me, Mr. Investor. Do you have anyone in your network? Can you fill these gaps for me? And if they say, no, we can't, and you say, well, gosh, earlier when I was talking about the plan and we asked you if you could carry me to a VC, you said you couldn't do that either. So you can't take me to a VC and you can't fill my team. So why am I even here talking to you? You're wasting my time. I wouldn't probably say that quite that harsh. But you've got to be thinking that way. I mean, if they can't bring you to help you their team, they can't help you take you to a VC, at best they can write you a check. Okay? Which for a lot of people, that's good enough. But that's not what you're really looking for. So you got to be interviewing them too, and push back on them a little bit. If they give you an answer you don't like, don't just accept that. Say, really? Now I don't necessarily agree with that. So you can push back on that a little bit, because part of your pitch and you're doing up there is also a test. They want to see how you. They may just be throwing questions and throwing things at you to see how you do react. They want to make sure. So if you get in a tough negotiating pinch, are you going to stand up? Are you going to make it happen? Or are you going to fold like a lawn chair? Are you going to really be there? Do they want to be there? If you fold with them, then you're probably going to fold in another business environment too, and that doesn't bode well, for the strength of the company. So go in there and push back on them as well. Okay, clear vision of the future. So now we get to the future of blank is blank. Understand the opportunity, what sandbox you're in and why we should care. Make sure, stay focused on your business case. What it's cost, who wants it, why, how does everyone benefit from that? Now we're going to talk about leadership a little bit on this team, okay? So the bottom line here, if I go too fast through this, so this is you as your CEO. This is what's important for you as a CEO. Understand the clear future, because the biggest thing that the CEO brings to the table is leadership and vision. Those are what they bring, because somebody has to have that vision, and it's probably the CEO who's got the vision, okay? Understand your opportunity so you can communicate that clearly as a CEO. And understand the business case so you can communicate that clearly as a CEO in short little bursts, okay? Now let's talk about leadership. How many of you pick up the paper or hear the article or something where somebody walked in, one person, he's an army of one, has no team, has no MVP, walks in and walks out with $5 million in funding? And you're like going, how do they do that? How can that happen? Okay? In most cases, it happens because that person has worked with that VC before or that investor before. That investor knows him. That investor doesn't care what this person's doing. He knows he's going to be successful. He's done it before. I know I can give him money. He's going to do it again. If he says he's going to do this, I know he is. Here's your money. Go do it, okay? Now, there's another reason for that. Okay. So, this is your CEO. This is who you want as a CEO. I guarantee you Moses could get you funded. No doubt in my mind Moses could get you funded. So there's a little deal out there that I call the Moses factor. And that is an individual, and we've all met him, that can walk in a room, you talk to him for 5 minutes, you're like, oh my God, I would follow this guy anywhere, or gal. It doesn't matter what this person does, they're going to be successful. I know they can. We've all met those people. Steve Jobs was a classic one. You look at the Elon Musks. They were not going to fail. They just weren't going to fail. And no matter what they did, where they went, what they were going to do, they could have done anything in life, they were not going to fail. They had the magical ability to talk to a room of 5 people, and those 5 people would join their team right now. Hey man, I'm going to do this. I think my vision of this, oh, that's amazing, absolutely. And they'll follow them. And I refer to that as the Moses factor. And that's another area that's unfair, because investors are more and more looking for the Moses factor. They're looking for that individual that can come in the room, wow the whole room, talk for a few minutes, and everybody's pulling out their checkbook. I want to buy your product. I think this is amazing, and we've all met those folks. The problem is 99% of us don't have that. That's not who we are, so it becomes work. So now how do you compete with the people that just naturally walk into a room and own it? Okay? It's like looking for jobs. You know, some people are professional interviewers. They just interview well. They look good in a suit. They seem to always answer the right questions. They smile just right. Their hair is parted exactly perfect. You know, and you're like, man, how do I compete against that? Okay? And so people get lost in that. So the Moses factor is not to be understood. So it's critical for your CEO to have this. So now what does it take? Confident, passionate, and charismatic. Okay? Charismatic. That can be a tough one. Sometimes you got to work on that one, and sometimes you just never get it. However, confident and passion is something anybody can do. Okay? And if confident is about it, if nobody believes in your product, then you're not, if you don't believe in it, you're not going to convince anybody else to do it. So when you go in there, you just want to have that passion and make it happen. So it's kind of funny. So I've been high-strung since I was born. So when I was young, if I was born today, I'd have been on Ritalin by 2. So when I was young, I was high-strung. Now that I'm older, I'm enthusiastic. Feels the same. But you need to sort of take that energy and be able to bring it out and do it in confidence. And so by confidence has that, don't be fear. So when you go in to talk to investors, it can be very, very intimidating. So when you go in and talk to an investor, you don't go in there thinking, man, I hope they invest in me. I hope they like my company. I hope they think I have a good idea. You need to be walking in there saying, you were so lucky you had me in today, because we're going to change everything when we're done here. So you got to go to that confidence. They should be honored that you are the one that they chose to walk in today, because their life is about to change. Okay? Hopefully for the better. And you got to walk in with that kind of confidence. And it just takes practice, and you just can't be afraid to fail. So like I tell the guys in my band when I used to, play what you play it loud and proud. Your mistakes will be proud and loud, but they're there. Don't hold back, don't fake it. Don't think, well, I don't want to make a mistake, so I'm just going to just go do it. You'd be amazed how often it works out, more often than not. Yes?
How do you find the balance between confident and being cocky?
Oh, that's a tricky one. That's really tricky. Between being confident and cocky. It's normally about the responses that come back. You can walk in and be confident but still be humble. So it's really more in your responses back, and not normally what I find when people are a little too cocky about it, their answers become kind of it becomes like they're looking down, and there's a difference in the directness and the delivery of it. So, but that's a really good question. You want to be confident, but you don't want to be ridiculous about it. Yeah. Okay, and everybody wants to follow you, right? So if you're out there looking for it, find your Moses or your Miss Moses, whichever works for your team. Okay, now we're going to go about financials. You'd be amazed how many financial charts and how many pitch decks I got, and nowhere on their financial charts does it ever tell me how they make money. All it tells me is we're going to make $82 million by year 3. How are you going to do that? All right, what do? Do you sell subscriptions? So when we do our financials, you're going to start it looking just like this. Boom, 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 some bullets. Clearly state how you make money. If you're a SaaS model, you're probably going to have fees. You may have tiered fee pricing, premium pricing, premium. If you're selling a hardware or a product, it may be a simple wholesale retail model. Sell it for less, make it for less, sell it for more, yada. But tell us what it is. If you've put a cost model together and you know that you're going to have a fee of $4.95 a month, then tell me we have a fee for $4.95 a month. Those numbers. It's just real simple. Real simple. How do you make money? I sell this, I do this, I do that. Always, tell us that in a couple bullets. Then you're going to come up here and you're going to talk about how you do that. And we're going to talk about this in a second. The other thing that is really nice, and investors just love this, and they love metrics. That's why on my plan I had a lot of numbers. Tell me how many you're going to do. I'm going to do 10 of these. I'm going to do these. I'm going to have 14,000 numbers and numbers and numbers. Metrics look good. Metrics look like you've analyzed things. Metrics look like you know what you're talking about. Metrics can answer questions. Metrics are just are related with formality and institutionalizing. So when you're new and you're young and you don't know what you're doing, you don't have many metrics. You do a lot of arm waving. Oh, it's cool, it's great, it's awesome. When you get older and more institutionalized and more of a professional, you say, well, 82% of the time is this, our cost of consumers. So having metrics are good. How many people are familiar with CAC, or customer acquisition cost? Okay, that's a good one. Everybody loves to know your customer acquisition cost. So if you have some metrics, you can say, hey, our customer acquisition cost is $4.85, and yada, yada. As you rattle these numbers off, those are always good things that so if you've got metrics, this is a good chart to put metrics. Hey, you've got a customer acquisition cost, our average cost of this. Some little things up here that can go along with your finances. But not to get too buried in throwing numbers out at them, they're relevant. But cost of acquisition, customer acquisition stuff are important. So here's what we're going to talk about. When you come to show me this, I still think this is a better chart than all of the bar charts and so forth, and all the colored bar charts, because there's something I can do in this chart that's very difficult to do on those charts. So when I'm talking about this, although it says financials on it, when you guys present this chart, don't present any financials. It's not about the financials. I can read your chart. I can tell you, I can see how much your revenue and what your expenses and what your gross margins are. I can read the chart. What's really important for me in this discussion that you want to stay focused on is your customer acquisition. How fast are you gaining customers? Where are you gaining those customers? That's the discussion we want here. And that kind of gets back to who asked the question about how did I get from 12,000 to 5.5 million? Okay. So we're going to talk about that here. So don't make this chart an eye chart. So I don't need to know all the different levels of your chart with EBITDA and yada, 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 and gross margins and ready to and all subtract. Keep it simple. This is, again, if somebody wants to know more information on this, great. I can have me and my CFO here tomorrow at 1 o'clock. We can sit down with your team, right? Okay. So all I want to know is how much money do you make? How much does it cost you to make that money? Is there anything left over? Simple numbers, okay? But we're not going to talk about that. You're going to let them read those numbers. And it's going to say that you're going to make $400 million a month down here, right? Okay? So what I want to know more importantly is let's talk about your customers. Not the money. Talk about your customers. So I may have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different customers or different customer revenue streams. So let's use a simple SaaS model, let's say, for example. So I've got one customer, which is just the user. And the user never pays anything. They're always going to get it for free. The purpose of the user is to have 80 million of them or 100 million of them on the website. So the users are always free. But it's important for me to know how many users I'm growing. Okay? So I'm going to say, let's say we're going to go live in January of 2015. And we say, but at the end of 15, we expect to have 5,000 free users on the system. Fair enough, okay? We expect in this year to have no paying customers because all we're going to do is early adopter programs. But I might have some early adopters. So I may have 10 people that come in that would be a normal paying customer. But we're not going to give anything. So when I come to revenue here, revenue is 0. But I can look here and say, okay, I can see that how that works. Now I'm going to come here to the next year in 2016, and that number may now jump up to 500,000 free users on my site and 5,000 paying customers, okay? Now, as we're talking about this, we can look and we can discuss whether, me as an investor, agree or disagree with your growth rate. If I look at that and say, oh, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, 150, 200,000, I go, okay, that looks manageable. I might say, well, it's actually kind of conservative. It seems like slow growth. We know what Facebook grew at. We know how fast Twitter grew. We know how fast Foursquare grew. Those numbers are all available to us. So we can look at those numbers. If you come here and say, I'm going to have 10,000, 20 million, 500 million, 7 billion, I may go back to, I don't buy that. But these numbers are real easy for us to talk. I can either agree or disagree on your growth rates. I think they're high, they're low, they seem reasonable, they don't seem reasonable. You know, we can talk about that. When I come down and talk about things like gross margin, oh, I see you're going to make $800 million. That gross margin number is an extremely complex number. How efficient was your operations? How well did you spend your expenses? How much was your overhead? Did you have any losses? Did you have this, that, and the other? All of a sudden now, this is an extremely complicated number to talk about. We can't really agree plus or minus whether 800 million is the right number. But we can talk about these. So talk about those and let them say that, oh, so you're telling me if you got that many people, you're going to have this. Exactly. So once we get to 1.2 million people, we're 160 million a year. So keep the conversation about customer acquisition. Because all that happens when you talk about the dollars is you get wrapped up around the axle. Just let them read the dollars and so forth. We don't believe your dollars anyway, so it doesn't matter. But does that make sense? These are much easier numbers. We can read what the numbers say. We really want to stay engaged in the conversation of how are you growing your customer base. Does that make sense? We can assume and do the math that if you say you can have this many people, it's going to relate in that much revenue. I mean, I'm sure your math works. You know, so we may go look at your cost model and find out that in fact your math doesn't work. How'd you come up with that number? It doesn't work. Okay, but we're just going to assume that that many people relates to that much revenue. Make sense? Any questions on that? All right. Was the lawyer beat you down? You know more of these high technical accounting type questions? Okay, now we technically, oh yeah, go ahead.
Hold on, hold on.
How would you show the diminishing return of your marketing dollars, right? Like your customer acquisition cost need not be the same for the first 1,000 with the first 10,000 with the first 100,000.
Sure, sure. Normally your customer acquisition cost at the beginning is high. And then as you go down the road and you become known, it becomes less, hopefully. But you don't necessarily have to show that. If you can embed that in your model. So let's talk about cost models a little bit real quick. So there's fundamentally two types of cost models. There's one that I call the engineering cost model, which will work fine for all you folks in here. Works fine for angel money, even money up to $1 million or so. And basically all you're doing is taking all the things you can possibly think about in expenses and listing them and spreading them out by month over 5 years. So you're going to take your best bet. When I go to look at your cost model, do I expect to see if you captured enough yellow stickies? No, I don't expect to see that. But if I look through that and I don't even see an office, then there's probably some holes in your cost model. So we're just going to go through and look at that from an engineering model. You're going to capture everything that you think you're going to spend it on, and let's assume you're accurate, and you're going to put it out there. It probably doesn't have any depreciated value of assets. It probably doesn't have any diminishings of this or that or the other or any other tax and stuff and EBITDAs and things like that. But I get an understanding sense that your expenses look like in a reasonable nature you captured everything, and so I can look at those in revenue, so I'm fine with that. Now, when you go out to do your VC pitch, you get your 10 million or 15 or 20 or whatever, they're going to require a full-blown CPA developed cost model. And that's going to be the one that's got 42 tabs along the bottom, and each tab's got 182 lines on it, and now neither one of us have a clue what's in that cost model anymore. But our accountant guy says everything's in there. You know, sort of like the lawyer who gave you the document you understood when it was 1 page, and he gave it back to you as 22, and now you can't even read it, although it appears to be in English. Okay, same thing with these cost models when they get really complex. That's where CPAs and CFOs, that's how they, that's job security. Because once they develop those models, and every corporation has them, I can guarantee you nobody really knows that model except the CPAs that put it together and the folks in there. So you can't get rid of them, because once you do that, you don't know your model anymore. Anyway, so that's the kind of model you need for the big money, and that's where you're going to have your diminishing returns. You're going to have all these other more complex formulas that would be expected in a more mature company. Does that make sense? But you can easily get away with a simple engineering model that kind of says, hey, here's what we got. Okay? Now, with that, at this point now, if you haven't convinced me to invest in you, this chart's not going to do it. So if you've convinced me that there's a great opportunity and you're solving something that can capture that opportunity, and that you have a team to execute that, or even if you don't, we might be able to work on that. I've seen your plan. It's pretty well, when I ask you what I've done, you've given me a pretty well detailed plan. I can really get a sense of your development, your go-to-market, your growth strategies. I can see that you're going to grow out in regions if that's the case. So I can understand what's going to happen. I know how long it is. We're talking about a 3-year window. I can see what your funding strategy was. So if I've answered all those things by now, I'm either going to say, wow, I like this, I'd like to get to know you more, and then we're going to do a deep dive. or we're just going to say thank you very much. Any questions? We'll call you. So anyway, so when you get to this page, this is really what I refer to as the closer. Where did I put my steel? There it is. Okay, so this one here I really use as a summary page. So this is where you're going to talk about the funding and so forth. So one of the things you're going to do is you're going to tell me how much money you want. So we want $1 million to execute our 24-month plan. Or I need, according to our earlier one, if I'm talking to an angel, I need $550K to execute my 12-month plan, right? Because we just went through the milestones, we just went through them in detail. So if I'm talking to a VC, I'm not going to ask for the $6 million that I need for both milestones, because then, excuse me, an angel, because no angel is going to give me the $6 million. If I'm talking to a VC, then I might say, hey, I need $6 million to execute my 36-month plan, which includes my go-to-market and my growth. Okay? And then, if that's the case, so you're going to just give me this one-liner. And I shouldn't need to talk about because we just spent a bunch of time on the plan, so you should know exactly what I'm doing with your money. What you probably don't know at this point, which we haven't talked about, is how that money was spread. So although you know exactly what I'm doing by bullet, by milestone, by date, what you might want to know is, well, great, how's that being spread? Well, so we're going to tell you that. 30% is going to product development, 60% is going to marketing, and 10% is going to operations, okay? Now, we just talked about the plan, we just talked about financials, and we just talked about where the money's going and how it's spread. Does anybody recognize the one word that I never used in any of those monetary discussions? Salaries. Who gets paid? Where do salaries go? I never once said anything about salaries. Did I say anything that you guys were going to get any money at all from salaries? Ah, okay, we're thinking a little. So, we never use the word salary on any of our charts, because although we recognize them, it's an unknown, it's a necessary evil, and investors like to say, I don't want to pay salaries, I just want to pay for marketing and product development. But that doesn't make any sense. To go marketing, I got to hire somebody and pay them to do marketing. Product development, I got to hire an engineer to do product development. So now now investors are sort of not making sense at all. Sort of like you guys most of the time. You know, so anyway, but now it's our turn to not make any sense, right? So here's what we do. If I'm doing sales and marketing, guess where my salaries are at? Oh, back up here. Wrong button. They're probably in sales and marketing, right? If I've got an engineer writing some coding for me, guess where his salary probably is, okay? If I've got a couple admin people doing some work or a few other things, they're probably in operations. So they're buried in here. So at the end of the day, if I'm talking to an investor, what are your salaries like? I could easily come back and get to that cocky versus confident and say, well, do you really care? Do you agree? Do you like my plan? Am I going to accomplish at the price you're willing to pay? Is my spread about right? If it is, then does it matter what the salaries are? And at the end of the day, the answer is always yes. But the point is, you've got your salaries embedded in there. And this isn't where you have this discussion. Where we're going to talk really about salaries is when I have you come back with your cost model and we sit down, because on your cost model you're going to tell me when you're going to start hiring people and what salaries you expect to pay them. So initially you may hire people initially for barely over minimum wage just so they have enough money to pay their bills. So if one of your folks coming on board says, well, I need $5,000 a month to pay my bills. Okay, I'll give you $60K a year. Way below market value, but that's what you're willing to pay, and you're going to stock them up with some stock options. But maybe after a year you expect to be profitable enough and you're going to raise them up to market value pricing. So now they are going to go to $125K, which is what they normally make if they were hired on the street. Okay? And so that's all in your cost model. So now we can look at your cost model and see where salaries come. But we don't talk about salaries. They're embedded in the fundamental functions that you're doing. So an investor, do you agree with this? So I always like to joke about the idea. So investors always ask, what are you going to do with my money? And the real question isn't, what are you going to do with my money? That's not the question they want to answer, but that's the one they always ask. What they really want the answer is, what do I get for my money? But that's not the one they ask. So let's say, for example, they ask me, so what are you going to do with my money? Say, well, I'm going to take the $500,000 and I'm going to give it to my cousin Guido. And they're going to go, doesn't sound like that's going to work to me. So let me explain a little bit. So my cousin Guido just retired. He knows the top CEOs of the top 14 companies of the biggest in the world that are going to be our competitive environment. I can call them up, tell him, get him going. He's going to have a meeting with all 14 of those companies within the first week, and we guarantee we can close 50% of them, which should generate about $400 million in revenue. Do you think that investor now is as concerned about me giving my money to Guido? Probably not. But I had a plan for it. There's that plan thing. We showed what we're going to do. And now he says, oh, okay, that's reasonable. Because obviously you're not the guy that's going to do it. Okay. So it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek that's probably not the right answer. But at the end of the day, if you have a good plan and the people to do that, the investors are going to, okay, fair enough. You know, that's what we're looking for there. Okay. So again, when you give them the money, you're going to look for, if you're talking to an angel compared to our first one of 550K, then you're going to say, I need 550K to execute my 12-month plan. It's going to buy me this, 15 patents and position me for that. If I'm going for an investor, then you're going to be more about revenues. If I'm going to a VC, because now revenues are important, it's going to get me to 60 million in revenue. It's going to have us 5,000 customers. We're going to have 15 patents and position for acquisition. That's what you're going to get for your money. Yeah.
I have a question. What's smarter to do? Short runway
Hold on.
Oh.
What is smarter to do a short runway, say 6 months, and raise 600,000 and do a second seed round, or raise everything at once?
Okay, good question. That's a good question. So let's ask you for this. So raise everything at once. Do you have any revenue right now? Then probably not going to get a VC to give you everything at once. So that question was easy to answer. You're not ready for a VC. Okay? Now, but I understand your question. So a lot of it has to do with where you're at and what you're truly ready for. And that's where the strategy comes in. Everybody would love to go and just talk to a VC and get the $10 million and have them pay for a little bit and never go back to look for funding again. Perfect world. However, you got to be ready for a VC. To talk to a VC, I need to show up with some revenue. I need to show up with this. So if I don't have that today, then asking for that million is probably not going to happen. So now I have to have a funding strategy that says, well, how do I get there to where I can go get that million? Well, to get that million, my MVP has to be out the door. I have to validate my product, and I have to be starting to get some revenue. So what does it take me to do that? I can do that in about 250K in 6 months. I can probably do that. So now I'm going to go find an angel to give me 250K, and in 6 months we're going to do that. Does that make sense? So it becomes your strategy of where you are and how you're going to get there. Everybody wants to take the first step into the deep end of the pool and get the $10 million and just be done with it. That doesn't happen very often. So understand where you are, what it takes to get to the next step, and build a strategy to get there, okay? So let's see, what else was I going to, there was something else I thought I was going to say on that. That slipped my mind. I thought I was going to say something else. Maybe it'll pop back to me here in a second. Okay, so now you're going to tell me what this buys me. And then if you've got some sort of an exit plan in terms, again, if you're going to do, we're going to do the standard, we're going to do it in a 6.5 convertible note, yada, 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 and we're going to do this, and that's what, or we're willing to give up 30% of the company for this, or whatever your terms that you think you may have tossed out there, knowing perfectly well they're going to be negotiated. But at least they can be out there. If you haven't thought about them at all, then that's fine. If you're really, really early, then you can do that. If you're talking to a VC, then you better have an answer to that. In an angel, maybe not as important, but you should still have at least thought about it and put something out there of what you think you want in a fundamental high-level deal. It doesn't have to have all the details, of what that is and so forth. But anyway, okay, so that just becomes your closer. Okay, Mr. Investor, here's why we're all here. We need X amount of money to do this. You understand what we're going to do, and I've showed you that we have the team to do it. We have the plan laid out to make it happen. Boom. Make checks out too. Okay, so that gets you to your closer there. Now, we're going to talk real quick about the executive summary. The executive summary, sorry about that, yeah.
Don't want to. I have one more question about the funding.
Okay.
How do you convince investor that this moment is the right moment for him to invest in your company and he should not wait another 6 months?
Oh, that's a good question. It's a tricky one. That's what your opportunity page is for. How do you convince the investor that he should invest now? And that comes on your opportunity page. So on your opportunity, if you can come up with a reason of why now, then that should be on your opportunity. Because your opportunity page is where you sell the investor. That's when you sell them that there's a reason to be here, there's lots of money, and it has to be now.
So you will not go the financial way, say, okay, if you step in now, I can give you a better deal than then you wait for another 3 months.
Well, he's going to tell you what deal he wants anyway. It's going to be more than you want to give him. So he's already starting from that position. You're not going to give him a better deal. He's always, Now, I'm being a little facetious about that, but the reality is that they're going to come up with a deal that you want. Rarely will you be able to convince an investor why it needs to be now. I've got 82 companies in line behind you that wants my money. You may do, and they all do too. So it's very difficult, but that's the whole sales pitch. The idea is to spool him up to get him to the why now, and it's like, don't let me get out of here without writing me a check. If I'm gone, it's gone. This window closes. I mean, it's a tricky counterpart, but you're right. It's an important part how to do that. It's all the sales team, So I know what I was going to say earlier when you mentioned about time frame. So in investor world, Shorter is always better. If you can give me my money tomorrow, I'm much more excited than getting my money in 10 years. Okay? So try to keep the time frame short. However, what happens in a shorter time frame is you increase company risk. Because now you may not be able to get it done in that time frame, and we don't want you to miss milestones. But you know, if you're giving me a plan that's 6 years long, as an angel investor, I'm probably not too excited. That's a long time to even think about getting my money back. So you want to try to keep your plan for an investor, angel, down to about 18, 24 months. And try to keep your money down for VCs down to 5 years. So normally you'll notice on these here, I actually had 3-year plans. And if you can try to formulate a 3-year plan that gets you out the door and exploded and large enough, then that could be a real attractive plan. The reality is you probably won't hit that finish line at 3 years, but you're in the growth mode, you're moving towards it in the right direction, all the right things are happening, and you're probably showing up on somebody's radar at that point that's starting to monitor you now and saying, let's keep an eye on these guys. When they get to here, let me know and we're going to put a buy offer on them or something like that. So if you can keep it like that and not stretch it out. So shorter, bigger is always good, like anything in those worlds. Yeah. Oh, you got the mic. He's got the mic.
I just wanted to find out, like, when you're emailing a presentation and you've got your speaker notes in there, obviously, because, you kind of have those Guy Kawasaki pointers. Does the investor...
But you're not going to mail that to him. You're not going to you're not going to send him a Guy Kawasaki. That won't make any sense for him. You're the only one that understands what that one says.
Yeah. No, what I meant was that if you obviously have to put in your speaker notes in there. So that's a long presentation. Do the investors have time to read through all of that?
If they did. So this presentation I just did you, if you follow this format, it's 8 pages.
Okay.
8 pages. This presentation can be given in 10 minutes or 6 minutes without a problem in any environment. Okay, now what you're going to really do is you're going to send him your executive summary, which we're about to talk about. Rarely will you send a pitch deck unless you know them and you've already talked to them enough that they're beyond an executive summary. And then you're going to sell them the pitch deck we talked about with all your bullets. No talking notes. They're not going to read your talking notes. They're going to look at the slides. They're probably going to put it in slide mode. They're going to go click, 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 done. So your slide you send them won't have any talking notes, but it'll have all the right bullets. They'll be able to read it just like we went through here, and they'll go, I get it.
No, what I meant was inside the slide itself.
No talking notes. He's not going to read the talking notes. He's going to read the slides. So I wouldn't send one with talking notes at the bottom in it. Your slides should stand alone. Your talking notes, keep in mind, what your talking notes are not your slides at all. Remember we talked about the slides produce the facts? Your talking lines are the story that's going along with it. You're not, and that's that. So that's kind of how that works. But yeah, you don't want to put those in there because what you say may be different than what I'd want somebody to actually read. There's a big difference between what people hear and what they read. So for example, when you and I are talking, my voice goes up, it goes down, it has power, less power, and based on that, we have a conversation. So sometimes you ever notice you can read a sentence in an email and it sounds like they're angry. And it's like, but they're really not. It's just the way they wrote that sentence. So the way we write things is much more complicated, just for various reasons. So you don't want to include any more than you have to, and it's just a risk of it getting misinterpreted, particularly when it's talking notes. Oh, sorry. Oh, what's that?
What I meant was explanatory notes.
No. If you have to explain it, then you need to be with it. So you should be sending him the pitch deck like this that has the bullets. He can read it. He may have questions when he's done. It may not answer all his questions, but it should stand alone. Yeah, if you're sending him a pitch deck, it has to be a pitch deck that can stand alone without notes. And where's the mic? There it is.
Yeah, so I have a question. So when a VC is about to make a decision for funding, does the VC really care about who are the existing angel investors?
Absolutely. Because odds are we own a big chunk of your company. So if we came in and gave you the first $500,000 and you got a convertible note right then, we'd be sitting on 30% of your company. So yeah, he's interested in that. So what they're going to look at is they're going to look and see what is the mix of angels involved, how many people are involved. When they look at your cap table, if there's, like we talked about earlier, where you went into crowdsourcing and got a bunch of equity at $1,000 a pop, they're going to look at that and say, there's just too many people involved in here. I don't want to get involved. Sometimes we've had them come up where the VCs have actually asked to buy the friends and family out. because they didn't think they brought any value to the table. They wanted to remove them from the cap table.
But I think you mentioned this point about the large numbers of the angels. But what do they really care about the background of angels? You know, if they have good business relations, and
no, it doesn't matter at that point because they're moving on. They're going to take over that anyway. That was more important before the VCs got there. Hopefully, those angels that came on board helped you get to that point to where now the VC is ready to write you a check. And at that point, then the VC doesn't care because they're going to take over and they're going to run the ship now. And all the angels are sitting in the boat you are, just hoping that we all don't get screwed out of this deal somehow. So we're all kind of in the same boat at that point. We already did our part. Does that make sense? Yeah. Got one over here.
So I have a related question to that. Do investors care who do they care if you take friends and family money, and do they care at all of the profile of the friends and family?
No, they're not investing in them. They're investing in you and your company. Friends and family doesn't matter.
And so they don't care if you've taken it or not either?
Well, we suspect, in most cases, we suspect you probably have taken some. But on your cap table, we're just going to want to know what the terms were you negotiated with that friends and family. Okay. What do they give them? How does that, where do they fit in the big pie? Because when we come in, we're looking at the pie. How much of that pie is left over? What's our piece of it? Is there enough left over to share for the next round when people come? All those kind of things. Yeah, it's not so much who did it beforehand, but there are some cases where they may buy them out because they just, for whatever reason, want to. And, but yeah.
So I have a question is about the procedure of raising. Saying you identified like few investors who are potentially interested. Does it matter like timeline to raise, how to better to approach this? Because clearly like there is if few investors are interested, everyone wants like 30% for 500,000. Like I need to choose and I need to kind of create like higher stakes for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you have any advice on that topic?
Okay, so if I think I hear this correctly. So, let's see. Let me make sure I understood what you were saying. One more time. Let me make sure I got what you were saying.
Okay, so saying identified like few potentially interested investors, okay, and not raising yet. Any advice on that on timeline? Like, does it matter how to approach? Does it matter to do it like one, approach everybody and say like I'm raising?
Got it. Okay, fair enough. Okay. So. Investors are always in a race to be second. Investors really don't like to be the first investor. Because if they're the first one and it goes south and they're kind of out there going, well, I guess I was the only idiot in the room, huh? Okay, so they race to be second. So what you want to do is align people that are interested. And that's referred to, somebody say, we've got a couple angels committed. Okay, where they're interested in what you're doing. They may have thrown a number out and said, yeah, we might give you a couple $100,000 for this, but we don't want to be first. So they may be committed. So you'll get some committed investors who are on the sideline. That doesn't mean that when the rubber hits the ground, they may choose to back out and say, we decided not to. But they're interested, they're there. So you're sort of gathering those up. Because a lot of times an investor will want to know if anybody else is interested. You say, well, I've got several other investors committed on the line that they're interested in this. So you'll hear that term sometimes. And so that allows every investor to say, oh, okay, so other people think this is good, which is a plus. Because it's like anything. If you're in a market and there's no competitors for long enough, you may not be in a market. And same thing with investors. Investors doesn't want to be the only investor in a company and can't figure out why a year later he's the only one that's ever invested. What's going on here? Now they get nervous that they may have made a major mistake. Okay. So you can get them committed on the side, and then they just call that committed on the side. Sometimes I got some folks on the sideline watching, which means they haven't committed an amount of money yet, but they're interested in monitoring us, and they'd be interested if any other investors come on board, because most of the investors know each other. So there's definitely a plus for that as you're doing it earlier. It doesn't have to be in waves. It can be, one should say you should always be looking for money. It's like being a rock star or a singer. You've always got a cassette in your back pocket or a CD or something, or so that no matter who you go, oh, I've got one of those. Like looking for a job. You've always got a resume in your car. In case you run across somebody, oh, I happen to have a resume. So you're always kind of looking, and you're always trying to build that sideline of folks ready to come in when the timing's right.
Okay, so you mentioned like investors race to be the second. So how to find this one, the lead one, who would be the first? Like what?
Okay. Well, sometimes it comes together. sometimes, so like myself, South Valley Angels, if we're gonna work with another investment group, we'd rather be a second. We'd rather them lead because they do all the heavy lifting. Obviously, we're going to do it ourselves, and we have to do it because there's nobody else to do it. But sometimes some companies don't only do seconds; they won't lead at all. Some investors just don't. Okay, so you understand these as they come in and say, well, we don't lead. Oh, okay, well, no problem. Then you can go out and find some other folks. And now your sales pitch becomes easier. Hey, I've got a secondary investor who wants to invest, but they don't lead. Oh, well, they must know something. So now it becomes once you have somebody on board, the sales pitch to get investment money is easier. Once you've raised it once and been successful, it's easier. If you've got investors that are out there waiting, that's why a lot of times it can be bad when somebody says, "Oh, I've got an investor as one of my advisors," and everybody goes, "Oh, outstanding! How much did he invest?" Well, he didn't invest anything. Well, why not? Now you've raised a red flag. Why do you have an investor on your team that has it invested? And maybe that investor only invests in sweat equity. They don't invest in cash. Or whatever the case, or they're simply filling a gap because they've got the skill sets that help you get through that, and you're giving them some equity for doing so or something. So there may be a reason, but a lot of people like to jump, oh yeah, I've got so-and-so from Band of Angels on my advisor. Oh, how much did he invest? He didn't invest in anything. And that now you've just raised a flag rather than giving them a good reason why you have an investor on your team. Does that make sense? Little things like that, you can shoot yourself in the foot. So here's another thing, and we're going to wrap up here a little bit before I get into the executive summary. Actually, we get executive summaries, and then I'll wrap it up. So executive summary, all you're going to do now is once you spend all the great time getting your pitch deck done, you're just going to cut and paste it off your pitch deck. The problem's going to be the same. So you got your problem, you have the solution, all the good stuff we talked about, and you know how to make money. So the same thing we talked about in the pitch deck is the same thing that's in your executive summary. It's one page, and it falls into three categories. One is your summary box. Whether you want your summary box on the left side or how you do that, but you want it to absolutely be in a box, either colored behind it or framed, because your eyes, when you look at a page, your eyes inherently go to things that are in a box, a frame, or a picture. It's just naturally that we look at first, okay? So put things in that box, and in that box you want the important stuff. I've got patents, I've got revenue, you know, I want money, I want this much. Some real key things in that box to make me understand. Because the idea is if I want to read that box, then I'm going to read that box in 10 seconds, and if it entices me, I'm going to read the rest of your deck. Going to back, you know, is the person going to read my pitch deck? We rarely even read the executive summaries, to be honest. I know nobody wants to hear that, but it's like resumes. I look at it for 10 seconds, say, been there, seen that, done, that looks boring, next. So those are the things that happen. So we want you to read that summary box and go, oh, they've got revenue, they've got this, they're doing this. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Let me read the rest of this here. And then when you go to the rest of it, you come into the why you, which is just a cut and paste of your problem, your solution, some of the benefits, some of the differentiators. So that's going to be in the why you, and then you're going to come down to the marketing. So do I have a? I do not. Okay, so when we're talking about that, this is kind of what we're looking at here. Let me go over to the other side here. That one's not going to work too good. It's running out of ink. And that's the only one we've got. We got one that doesn't work. Okay, so normally think of it as a three-way piece. You got your frame. Let's say your frame's on this side of the piece, and then over here you're going to have. Let's see, does that work for you guys? Let's go this way. So we're looking at it. So here's the right side of your page. Those sides, you got your box here. This is the why you, and then down below you can do your marketing. You can even take your quad chart, cut and paste it right in there, cut and paste your financial right in there. All your themes are going to be clear, all that. So you're just going to cut the future of and all that. Just cut and paste it down there. Probably take you an hour to do your executive summary once you're done with the rest of it. And we kind of talked about these. You're defensible and scalable. That's the bottom line there. Okay, so that's fundamentally what we're going to go through today. We covered a lot of territory, and there's a lot of depth and go on here. So if you've got my business card, send me an email. If you don't, I have a few more left up here. I can get them to you. Send me an email. I'll send all this to you. I'll send you the checklist and so forth. And so, go ahead.
So the question is, so quick two questions. One is like, so how long typically it takes for you to like, you know, getting your executive summary in your email until like that startup getting funded, and when should startup like approach you? Like,
well, it doesn't do me any good to approach me before I have an MVP because we're probably not going to listen to you. How long it take? We've closed deals in as fast as a week, but most of them take quite a while. So let me do a little closer here for you folks. So one of the things I offer out to anybody that comes to my workshops is I have a program which nobody in this valley offers I will sit down with you one-on-one and do a one-on-one acceleration with you. We'll sit down, we'll go through your plan, we'll go through whatever you have today that you call a pitch deck. We'll tighten up your plan, we'll look at your gaps, we'll just get you all set up, we'll create you a pitch deck that works for any investors, we'll give you an executive summary done. We'll take a look at my network to see if there's anything that we can do. We'll do a true acceleration for you. We'll tighten you up and we'll get going. The way it works is the first session we do, we need to sit down. I have a couple offices we can sit down in, and it's about 3.5 hours long. We have to get through top to bottom of your plan the first time through. So you and your team, or you or whoever, will sit down for about 3.5 hours and we'll pound through everything. And I'll probably make you squirm a little bit, because when we start talking about a plan and you start waving your arms, I want to make you sit on them and you're going to give me some numbers. So I'm going to force you to go through it. When we're done, I can guarantee you'll have a clarity that you probably don't have today. Now, when that session is done, I'm going to send you on your way. You're going to go and you're going to do your homework for everything that we found wrong, or holes, or gaps, or things that you were missing. You're going to go back and try to address those. When you're done, you're going to send me the data back again. And I'm going to mark it up, and at that time, we don't have to get back together again. We can just do it over Skype or WebEx, or we'll just go through and talk through it and just refine. And we'll go through that process probably 2 or 3 times. When that's done, you should have a clear pitch deck. We should have worked through all your stuff from a gross level down to a refined level. You should be ready to pitch. I can guarantee you're going to be more confident in the way you talk about it. It's going to be clear and concise. And then when that's done, we'll take a look whether or not we move you up to the next level, so whether it goes to my investor relations and so forth. So we take one thing at a time, and I do this workshop for $600. This does a couple things for me. One, it makes me spend a lot of money, a lot of time for $600. But what it does, it allows me to work with each one of you. We can build teams up. Some of you may not be ready now, some of you may be ready later, but it allows me to understand who you guys are, work with teams, and figure out who's good people to pass up the ranks to my investors who are looking for deals that are vetted. They don't want people walking off the street. So we can sit down and do that. We can take a look at if any of my partners and networks that I have in my network may fit with you. I've placed chief sales officers. I've placed CEOs in companies. I've connected manufacturing companies up with people. So we'll take a look at all those things. So that's the offer I give out to anybody that's in here. It's $600. And if you send me your data, I will guarantee I'll mark it up and have it back to you within 24 hours. So if you guys are serious about it, there's a lot of work to getting a startup going. And most people fail just by not being able to get their message clearly and concisely educated, let alone having a plan and having all that stuff. Just trying to talk to an investor intelligently is really more where most entrepreneurs fail. So there's a lot of folks out there learning how to do this. Yeah.
Do we need to have the MVP ready by the time we talk to you?
No, there's nothing that when you need to talk to me. So I'm the classic thing. You can come talk to me as early as you want. The earlier you talk to me, the faster we can push you down the road in a direction. If you come to me without having thought everything through or even close, you just I just worked with a guy Monday who just had an idea. Well, obviously we're not going to get him to a tight pitch deck and a tight executive summary because he's still trying to figure out which way's up. But what we did do was we probably knocked out 2 years of work that he'd have spent on his own time to figure out where to get it, and we did it in 4 hours. So the earlier you come, there's going to be benefit. The perfect environment for you is where you have a pitch deck. You may have taken this, you've tweaked it into this format a little bit, and now we sit down and I understand where your head's at. So there's probably a little bit more, but all of them have benefit, and we'll tweak it to wherever you are in the stage of what you're doing. So you don't have to be any particular place. I'd recommend that if you haven't thought of anything at all, you're probably a little too early. But if you do have a pitch deck and you have an understanding of what you're trying to do, then you're not too early. We'll get you started sooner, and we'll just do that. So there's anytime you're ready, we'll go down that. Cool.
Did you upload this thing, or
yeah, you send me an email and I'll reply back to you. If you didn't get my card, I got a few more left up here. Did you get one?
Yes. No.
Oh no, there you go.
Thank you.
So so send me an email, because you'll find that when I work with entrepreneurs, I want to make sure that you guys are motivated. So don't expect me to send you an email with the attachment. You send it to me, I'll reply, I'll send it back. When we do the 3.5-hour session and you go on your way, don't expect me to call you up a week later and say, hey, how you doing on that pitch deck? I'm not going to bug you. You guys are going to go and do your work, and if you're done in 2 days, send it in 2 days. I've had people go through my sessions and send their updates to me 4 months later, because a lot of things went on and it changed their whole direction and so forth. So I'll make but as soon as you send them back to me, I'll have them back to you in 24 hours. Yeah. Is there 2 of them? Use either one. My other card looks like that. I just didn't bring any of those with me. They both get to me. They both get to my phone. Yeah.
So how backed up are you on your 3.5-hour sessions? How early do we need to sign?
Well, I just finished the last one I had on the books yesterday, and I always do that specifically to have a clear window, so I always keep my week afterwards clear. I do work weekends occasionally, so I would recommend that, you know, just send me an email, and we'll book it out. I've got time tomorrow. I've got time starting Monday. I always make sure the week afterward is clear, because some people just absolutely positively have to do it now, which is the right attitude for a startup.
It's probably going to take me some more time to do that. So that's why, like, as a rule of thumb, like, is it a couple of weeks in advance?
No, if you call me, we'll get something as soon as we can. Some people meet in the evenings because they work all day. Some folks work during the day. So I try to meet yours. I understand the startup environment. Everything needed to be done yesterday. You know, so I won't be the choke point. If you call me and say I'm ready, then we'll look at the first available date probably in a couple days and say let's do that. But keep in mind, it's getting tough out there. You know, it's amazing just the little tiny things that can save you from lots of frustration to actually saying, oh, that wasn't too bad. I mean, I've sat down with people who've been trying to get funded for 6 months. So one of my gentlemen, who's actually on my website, I put him up there because he always loves it. So he came down, couldn't get funded at all. Sat down with me, we went through our session, we got done. His first pitch, he got 50K. And he's spent 6 months and couldn't get even a warm response. As soon as we redid the strategy and put him together and changed his message, he got funded the first pitch. So that doesn't happen all the time. In fact, happens most of the time. It doesn't happen like that. But it's a good story.
Question here.
Yeah.
See, if an angel investor invests 500,000 and gets 30% of the company, the VC who's going to come at a later stage may have to invest 5 million for maybe 10%, right? Then why do they have more clout?
Well, it's interesting. Okay, so if an investor invested in you $500,000 and you gave him 30% of the company, then automatically says your valuation was 1.5 million, right? Okay. Well, now if you guys did your job and got out there, and now your evaluation, let's say you go out and you decide when you're going to go talk to a VC that your valuation now is 40 million. Okay. So now he's going to come in with his 10 million, and so at best case he's going to get 25%, right? Okay. So the reality is the numbers and how that breaks down gets a little tricky when you start doing the math. And so there's a variety of things that can happen to adjust that. So a lot of times when an angel comes in, angels don't get 30% of the company very often. Because normally what happens when you come into an angel is you're going to ask for more money than you're worth. Now you're thinking you're worth $5 million, but you're asking for 500K, which means you'd give an investor 10%, right? Okay. So in a case like that, you're probably really not worth $5 million. So you're going to probably arrange where the VC is going to give you some money and you're going to agree on 10, 12, 15%. Right? You know, rarely are you now an investor may come back and say, well, we'll give you, if you want 500K, but we think you're worth $1 million and we're not going to take 50% of your company for that, but we do want 20%. So it'll be more negotiable on that. It's usually not a straight math. Even though if you look at the simple books and read them, they always tell you it's a simple math formula, but it's not quite.
Any other question?
Yeah, I'm trying to raise money for an IP that's part of a company. So when investors...
So you want to buy the IP? Is that what you're trying to do, is buy the IP?
The IP, I'm trying to raise money for an IP, for a product that's a part of a company.
But you're trying to submit the IP or buy the IP?
No, the product. Basically, when I say IP, I mean the product. You know?
Right, but you said you're trying to acquire it. Are you trying to buy it from somebody, or do you have the IP that you're going to register?
No, it's my own IP that I'm trying to
Okay,
build.
so you want the money to go and file the IP.
Trying to raise money for that product, for that specific product.
For that product. Okay, you're raising for that product, okay.
So when the investors invest, does that go to the product or to the company?
The invest? The invest goes to the company.
It goes to the company, right?
Yeah.
So whatever investment I made, since I'm bootstrapping my startup, whatever investment I made, like for example, if I get a $500,000 funding, if I invested $50,000, so will I get that investment back?
No, investment never comes back.
No, because I'm sharing.
It gets sold and you have an acquisition or something happens and then a bunch of money comes back, and then your investment comes back. So
basically I negotiate on the equity terms.
Sure.
That's okay.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Okay, so so when an investor invests, they don't invest in a product, they invest in a company. That's why they'll make you get a C corporation. No, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go out and be something. You still may in fact just be a product, but you're going to go out as a company. So you're going to file as a C corporation. If you're not a C corporation, then you have no equity to offer to anybody, right? Okay, so you have to do that. So once you've done that, then there's an equity to the company. So now when I invest, I'm investing in the company. Now, if that company goes upside down and goes belly up and you fail and you lose all the money, then we'll probably own your IP out of that investment. That's what we'll get out of that deal. Is we'll get your IP and we'll go find a better team and do it and try to launch it again if we want. Or not, or it'll just more likely it's going to die on the vine and we'll all just sort of suck it up and cry on our Wheaties and go home.
Okay.
Are the shares of the founders also vested?
Normally the founder shares get vested, but that's all up to you. You can choose to do it. That's one of the things that defines a founder, is they're committed to come in.
The investor comes in, then he insists that like the shares also, the shares also get vested.
Well, they're already committed. They're already taken for. They're already part of the pie.
So can it be accelerated because of let's say the time spent on work?
Oh, vesting can always be accelerated, sure.
Based on the
The
time.
vesting is to protect you so that somebody doesn't walk out with all the shares after 2 days.
No, I'm talking about the founder himself.
Well, the founder himself, I mean, if he's a founder, he probably has fully vested. There's a reason he's a founder. He's there. He's committed with you. He's part of the team. He's just like you. He's not an employee.
So his shares are not vested?
Sure, they could be. They probably will be. But vesting is up to you. Vesting is standard of 4-year vesting, and you let people earn it. What you don't want to do is give everybody their shares on day 1, and then on day 2 they leave and they have 50,000 shares of stock. And now there's nothing you can do about it. They just left with a chunk of your company and you got nothing for it. If you're a founder, if you've identified somebody as a founder, then I'm assuming at that point you guys have already made a strategic relationship that there's a reason he's a founder, because you guys are going committed to this full steam ahead. Now you still may vest it, say, hey, these is how that sure is, you know, because as the individual CEO or as the founding of the team, it's critical for you to not give your shares away and have everybody run away with all your shares. So you'll always probably want some vesting. Now, as soon as funding coming, or as soon as that founder does his thing, you may choose to give it them once he's committed himself. Those are more how comfortable are you with that founder? Because once somebody tells me they're a founder, then that means you both are committed 100%, or they're an employee.
So this is probably a bit of a sidebar question for you. One of the pieces of advice that somebody gave me was that he who owns the board of directors owns his destiny. And he was telling me this in context of, how do you establish the C corporation, the whole common shares versus preferred shares, all of that stuff. My question is, you've been doing this for a long time. You've been around the block a couple of times. Are there any tips or advice that you can offer us on how to set up the company, or any gotchas that you can kind of warn us against?
Well, one of them is the ones we were talking about. As you're setting up your founders and everything, be careful about just giving the shares away without an investing time period. Look at time periods or performance factors for the vesting of the shares. The other one I would say early on, before you make any key decisions, I would definitely make sure you have a legal team somewhere that you can call up and ask just basic questions to. A lot of the folks around here will work and answer questions without charging any money for them, If you get some of the folks on here, they're looking for you to be a long-term partner, so they'll answer basic questions, and maybe you'll give them some money or some equity when they do things like file a patent for you, or incorporate you, or whatever the case may be, do a term sheet negotiation, then that might be a different case there. But I would say just, watch out on your venture, on your vesting, and try to keep some legal people near you so you can just ask them some questions when they come up. Because the problem with the legal aspect is once you've made the mistake, it's kind of like the internet, it's there forever.
Any more questions?
How do you, as an investor or potential investor, how do you look at if we've paid contractors through equity instead of...
Paid contractors through equity.
So they're on the cap table.
Well, it depends. Is that a one-time shot contractor, or did you hire them for the long term? Are they your design team that's going to be with you for the long haul, or did you just hire somebody to paint your room?
So technical.
Okay, well, if you're paying them to stay with you as a team, that's fine. But the expectation is I would give them vesting as well. If they just came in and wrote one piece of code and left, then I'd write them a check and send them on their way. I wouldn't give them equity. Yeah, the equity is long-term. That's long-term money. That's why when I do these deals, So there's a lot of, you can go up Page Mill Road or anywhere in Palo Alto or San Mateo or San Francisco and find consultants that'll help you sit down and do your plan all day. They'll sit down and give you all the promising words on how to do your pitch deck and tell you everything that's great and so forth. They're going to generally do things like ask for $5,000, which they may defer, and they're going to ask for 3% of your company. Well, we're sitting down doing a task. We're writing a pitch deck. Why should you pay me equity in your company to help you write a pitch deck? It's a task. Just pay me for it and move on. Make it short term. Now, granted, I do it for a loss leader of $600 instead of the $5,000, which I should probably charge, but I have different reasoning for that. So when it comes to tasks, if you can, just write the person a check and move on. Equity, you're involved for life. That person's never going to go away.
For stickiness.
Yeah.
Those guys.
Yeah, now if you want to keep them and you want to stay there and you want to go back to them and use them and tap them, then go ahead, then give them some equity. Also, when you're talking to investors, advisors are worth 0.5% of equity, 3% at most. And at 3% equity, they better bring in some home runs to the table and working with you 10 or 15 hours a week and really bring in some value. If it's an advisor, you're going to call once in a while, ask a question, they helped you do this, they helped you do that, maybe helped you a little bit on your pitch deck, that's 0.5%. So those are some numbers to keep in mind on your advisors. I know advisors out there that'll come up and they want you to give them 10% of your company to be an advisor. Move on to a new advisor. Yeah.
Well, I've been involved in a startup that we have a series of, I guess you call them one-shot consultants.
Okay.
So I've essentially ended up being the glue between the one-shot consultants.
Okay.
And when the founder can get money. I'm not sure what's going on with that sort of. I'm not sure where the question is. First of all, the question is,
answer that one.
Is that more valuable to them than just being a continuing interest in the company?
It can be. Being a consultant in the space is a really tricky one, just because you're working with people that don't have any money. So that's always difficult in a business model, not getting paid. But if the equity should be focused on long-term value over time, not just a one-time deal. Now, if that one-time thing could be critical and truly valuable, then maybe it's worth 5,000 shares of stock or something. But the cost to you to do that, then go get your lawyer to put up a stock agreement and yada yada yada. It's going to probably cost you several $100s, of legal time to get that one document put out to give that person 5,000 shares. So if you're going to do that, why don't you just give the person $600 and just be done with it, not worry about it, keep your company and move on. So
in my case, they've done all that. It's just that they keep periodically run out of money, and I don't hear from them for 6 months, and then we got a new bunch of.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, if you're going to stay on board as a business consultant, I do that with companies where I've got equity in the company, I'm available to them, I'm an advisor, but I'm truly just an advisor, and they call me when they need me. All of a sudden, hey, things are going good, now they're not. And they never call me when it's going good. They never call me and say, hey, guess what? We just met all these milestones, we got a $7 million contract. It's always, Gary, we have a problem. And it's like, okay, so then I go fix that one, whatever that is. One of these days I'm waiting for one of those to call me when it's good news. Boy, that's, 0.5% to 1% is standard for most advisors. All right.